Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. But this week, I am not joined by the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. Again, we had some trouble linking up our schedules. It happens. It's a bummer, but we are going to be back next week, and we're going to be talking about the origin story of the $1 million man character. It's going to be a really fun episode. I'm looking forward to doing that one. But this week, we are still doing something really cool. This time, it's a look back to 1989. I combined 5 episodes where we covered 1989 last year in 2024. And we're starting with the Royal Rumble. Then we're going to WrestleMania. Then it's the spring of 89. We've got SummerSlam 89, and we're wrapping it up with Survivor Series 1989. What a crazy busy year in professional wrestling, and honestly like a pivotal year in the business. A lot going on, a lot to discuss. I hope that you guys enjoy the episode, and please join us next week. We got something really cool going on, talking about the origins of the $1 million man right here on Everybody's Got a Pod. The former sheep herders are coming into the WWF in late 1988, but they've been rebranded as the Bushwhackers, and to say that their characters have changed would be a big understatement as they're coming in the door here. Ted, what do you recall about your earliest experiences around Luke and Butch as the sheep herders?
You know what? Those guys were great. And I loved them. I mean, it was kind of like the, their gimmick. They do the deal and they would, get everybody to follow them. But, aside from the gimmick, and all the faces they could make and all that stuff, they were really great workers. I mean, it was like a night off because they were so easy to work with. You didn't have to do much coaxing or leading. It was just a natural. And so to have a tag match with those guys, I would always look forward to it. Vince brings them in and they make this change. And again, it's kind of like me. They're going to be good guys, but the kids are going to like them because of all that crazy stuff they do. For me, the first time I went to the WWF, I was a babyface. So when Vince brought me back in, he brought me back in. The whole thing. We told the story about here's the one thing everybody hates is someone who, by virtue of their wealth, bullies people. The character of the $1 million man. And I was healed, but it was always easy to work with these guys because the kids loved them. And of course, it was especially, I had a lot of fun because, being one of the most hated heels, and wrestling with the Bushwhackers was, and they would do, they would do things to where, it's like I'd be backing up like this and, he comes in the ring, he just taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around and he just pokes me in the eyes. And I just go down and sell the heck out of it. Just, some of it was silly stuff, but you mixed it with a serious match. It's hard to explain, but they were great at it.
They were, and I think that a lot of the old school diehard wrestling fans are like, Vince ruined them. They were the sheep herders, and they were, this really nasty couple tag team wrestlers, the original hardcore type style. And it's like, hey, look, that might not fit your preference. However, I would be willing to bet that they would tell you they made the best money while they were with the WWF, and their legacy is what they did in the WWF, much like yours is.
Yep, absolutely.
And couple guys that got the Hall of Fame nod in 2015, very well deserved.
Absolutely.
Well, somebody who's getting ready to head out the door at this time is your old friend Harley Race. He's coming off surgery, and he'll make a brief return in 1988 before leaving the company following the Rumble. Apparently, Harley is citing road fatigue as one of the reasons he was leaving, which really kind of stuck out to me as I was reading about it, because we're talking about a guy who's a traveling NWA world champion, and now here he is in the WWF, and he's like, hey, this travel's too much. It's man, that really speaks volumes. What can you tell us about how brutal the travel was here in the late 80s in the
Oh
WWF?
gosh. I mean, when I started, some of the guys told me, they said, Ted, they said the first couple of years when he was just trying to, he said, it was even worse. And I said, worse? Yeah, it was worse. I mean, they would be on the road sometimes for, like weeks on end, could you imagine going on the road and not getting home for 2 months?
Oh my gosh.
But by the time I got there, they had started to whittle it down, and back then when I first started, it was 3 weeks on the road and a week off. So it was 21 days, 21 cities.
Oh,
that's brutal.
Yes.
Oh, I would wake up at hotels sometimes and lay there a minute and go, okay, where the hell am I? And I would actually roll over on the, in the hotel rooms, there's a nameplate on the phone, and it's got the name of the hotel and the phone number. And I would sometimes I'd roll over and go, oh, okay, I'm in Chicago.
Man, it's just absolute insanity what you guys were doing out there on the road. And it's like, you're living that rock star lifestyle. Of course, you're going to do rock star things, like maybe take an upper to be able to make the next town, or, okay, I need to blow off some steam after the show. You go and get drunk with your friends. So it's like, it's no wonder that there were so many issues going on in these days.
Yeah.
And, talking to Jake about this whole thing, he had said, I'd mentioned this about Harley, and he was like, well, here's the difference. He's like, Harley was the traveling NWA champion, but he might work, 3 days if during that travel week. He's like, we were working every single day. He's like, so, yep, he's traveling about as much as before, but now he's got to work every day as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 days a week.
Well, and now I don't know, again, I know that when the NWA champion would come to the Amarillo territory, and that's where I was during the time that Harley was champion, he wrestled every night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was like he came in and he would wrestle whoever the top babyface at the time was, and then every night they'd go an hour. Now, I don't know, he may have had to have a couple of travel days or whatever, but the life of the world champion. Now, it's like the WWF world champion was only the world champion in the WWF.
Mm-hmm.
The AWA world champion was only the world champion in the AWA territory. The NWA world champion was the world champion in territories all over the country. That's the difference.
A lot of pressure, a lot of expectation.
Yeah.
So, man, it's incredible that guys like him and Terry Funk and all the others, Ric Flair, were able to do it at the level that they did for as long as they did.
Yep.
Well, so I do have to ask you before we move off the topic of Harley, the character that he was portraying here in the WWF is a huge, huge departure from what we saw him as previously in his career. In years prior, he was this no-nonsense wrestler type guy. But during his WWF run, he's working as King Harley Race, and everything is very gimmicky and cartoonish. We know that Vince was trying to go more mainstream, of course, as you and I have discussed here before.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, your personal opinion. You come into the WWF, Harley Race is King Harley Race while he's here. What did you think? Would they have been better served letting him just be Harley Race of old?
Well, my opinion is yes. For me, it was kind of like, the people have seen this guy as, just Harley Race. This, in the make-believe world of professional wrestling, he's a tough guy. And in the real life, he's a tough guy.
Right.
He's a guy you do not, I would say it this way. If you had to walk down a dark alley at night and you knew there were a bunch of thugs in the alley, if you only had your choice of having one person to go with you, it would be Harley Race. But sometimes I wonder if that was like Vince, like a rib, You know, like, okay, this big tough Harley race, and I'm going to make him king. Again, you know what I have to, and here's the thing that's hard for me too. It's like, and I think Jake would probably agree with me this, because we grew up in the old school way. Our fathers were old school wrestlers. And so this new thing with the WWF and, you know, trying to market towards children and, you know, toys and, you know, stuff like that, you know, you're bigger than life, you know, hero, Hulk Hogan, and, you know, and I'm like Snadley Whiplash, you know, everybody's got a price for me. Kind of cartoonish. And so, you know, I have to keep that in mind in terms of what Vince would find for Harley. So, you know, I don't know. It swings both ways, I think.
He was selling to a different audience than you guys had been in the territories. In the territories, you're selling to adult men. And in the WWF, you're selling your product to children. And so with that being the case, kids like cartoons, which means you've got to be a cartoon character.
Yeah.
So I mean, you had mentioned that possibly a rib on Harley, and Harley used to be a promoter, of course, much like Vince. So maybe you know, where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. And I do have to ask you. I asked Jake this question, and he didn't know anything about it, so I'll ask you. Did you ever hear the story of Harley threatening to kill Hulk Hogan before Race joined the WWF?
Nope.
You didn't?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version because I don't know all of it, but in a nutshell, I guess he was pissed off that the WWF was stealing business from his territory, and so I think he actually pulled a gun on Hulk Hogan at one point and threatened him. I'm going to look this story up and come back more prepared the next time.
You know,
I know I've heard it. I just don't remember all the details.
You know, I might, when we get through the podcast, I might pick up my phone and call Hulk and go, did he really do that?
As a matter of fact, and you know what, I'm just going to Google it real quick so we can actually talk about it, because I think that Hulk is the one who revealed the story. So here we go. Here's the article. Getting through the bullshit part of it. We pumped the signal. This is Hogan. We pumped the signal into Kansas City for 8 weeks. Harley Race had been there for like 18 years. He was the NWA champion. I'm the champion of the world, and he's a very proud and mean son of a bitch. And all of a sudden, here comes this blonde-haired idiot from New York and went, I'm the WWF champion, the WWE champion. I'm coming to Kemper Arena. We pumped the segment. So I fly into town. I show up about 2 p.m. My guys call me and said, Harley Race came down here with a gun. He tried to light the ring on fire. They told me, Harley said, when I show up, he's going to kill you. I had to go to the bathroom and my stomach was killing me. So I'm sitting on the toilet going to the bathroom. Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, said, oh my God, the fucking guy is here. He's going to kill you, Hogan. I pull my wrestling yellow tights up. I don't even wipe my ass as fast as I could because I don't want to get caught with my pants down and I don't have a fighting chance. I blow out of the bathroom. I turn around the corner and he puts that gun right in my face. He said, I should kill you for coming in and doing this. And this is Harley Race talking to me. And he puts the gun down and he goes, I really need a job. I went, holy shit. I shook his hand, brother. I was a huge fan. Love the guy to death. Wow. All right. So there you go.
So he said, Harley said, I really need a job.
Yeah, I guess at first Harley threatened him, and then he was like, by the way, could I get a job?
Yeah. Well, and again, you know, you have to understand that Harley was one of the owners of the Kansas City territory. He and Bob Geigel and I think it was Pat O'Connor. Those 3 guys were partners, and that, you know, the Kansas City territory was like, it wasn't a huge territory, but I mean, it was theirs. They were the owners. You know, they were the promoters of that territory as a team. You know, O'Connor, Harley, and Bob Geigel, and Bob Geigel and O'Connor are both, I think, older than Harley.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so anyway,
as hearing that story, would you say that like you knew Harley Race about as well as anybody? Does that sound like the Harley Race you knew?
Yeah, I could see him doing it. It's like, yeah, like you talk about a rib.
Yeah, hand job. Oh man, awesome. I'm glad we read that. Another guy who's going to retire briefly in 1988 before making his return at the end of the year is Big John Studd. He'll be coming back into the company as a babyface, and he's going to get a nice push right out of the gate. And talking with Jake and Hacksaw about John, I heard varying accounts on how they viewed him as a performer and as a guy. What were your experiences like with John?
I didn't have too many, but I wasn't that impressed. Okay.
So, we're talking about a dude who's whatever, 6'10", 7 foot tall, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, he's impressive to look at, but
right.
His work didn't impress me that much.
No, it's, you've got Andre, and then you've got pretty much every other 7 foot giant out there. Like, Andre's in a league of his own. So, like, comparing the two is, it's not easy.
Just curious, what did Jake say?
So Jake was like, he seemed like a nice enough guy and everything, but he was like, essentially, he was like, the guy was dim-witted. It was pretty much how he put it. He was like, I think Jake actually said he was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He was a little bit closer to being like a butter knife.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well said. I mean, that's basically, like I said, big guy, very impressive to look at, but his work, no, he
left a little bit lacking. Apparently, it was so Bruce Pritchard tells the story that Big John came in and said, like, hey, Bruce, I'm ready to come back to work, and I can deadlift whatever. It was some crazy amount, like 1,200 pounds or something. He's like, I can deadlift all this weight. He's like, I'm in the best shape of my life. So Bruce gets him to the gym, and he's like, all right, we're gonna film a vignette of you deadlifting, and here he couldn't do it. And so Bruce had to put some gimmicked plates on the thing to get the vignette.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, apparently he told a big whopping lie to come back into the territory here. But still, he's coming in and he's getting a big push, and he's about to win this Royal Rumble, which is, back then it wasn't quite what it is now, where you get the title shot and it's this huge thing. But it is still like they're really highlighting this guy coming back in the door.
Yeah.
So both Jake and Jim pointed out about John that Andre did not like him at all. And after the Rumble, the two of them are going to be working together. What do you remember about Andre disliking Big John Studd?
Yep. Yeah. No, he didn't like him at all. And again, obviously, here's a guy who is not that good, and is big. And when you're Andre the Giant, it's kind of like, it's Andre's like, there's only one giant, and it ain't you. It ain't you, John Studd. So and again, okay, not too many people, a lot of people had the same, thought about John Studd as Jake, me, probably. I don't know if you asked Hacksaw, but it's just, it's wasn't a bad guy, big strong guy, but he wasn't this, and again, obviously willing to lie to get back in, get back. Oh, all of a sudden you can't. What happened? Did you not eat your Wheaties this morning? You didn't eat your spinach so you could pull a Popeye routine and lift all that weight.
Yeah, it got to be a little bit embarrassing to have like a vignette centered around it. And
yeah,
what you said,
and then you can't do it. Yeah,
that would be terrible.
But to me, there were a lot of big guys, and there were a lot of big guys that there were some that were decent workers. To me, nobody topped Andre. Andre mastered the skill of being able to get in the ring with somebody that's half his size and find a way to make the people believe that he just might lose. That's hard to do. So, but Andre could do it. I mean, how many people that got in the ring with Andre were as big as Andre? Nobody.
Yeah, probably nobody ever.
Yeah. So,
Man, it's and by the way, like Jim did have nice things to say about Big John Studd, in that he was a nice guy. He was really soft spoken. He was a gentleman. He was like, so I had no issues with John. But that being said, objectively, a guy like you or Jake, who's like second generation wrestler, you view wrestling very differently from anybody else. Where, yep, it's sports entertainment, but also it's like it's a trade, right? It's a trade that's been passed down to you from your fathers, and something that you learned and put your heart and soul into. And you see a guy like this come in, and you're like, this guy's getting a big push because what? Because he's huge. Like, he can't work like I can, so it's got to be a weird, warring perspective.
Well, and again, I didn't, it's like I didn't have anything against him. Wasn't that? But it's just, he was very big and impressive, but that's about where it ended.
Mm-hmm.
Like to your point, it couldn't work.
Right.
He had, whoever's in the ring with it has to lead him. Andre could get in the match and tell whoever he's working with what to do and how to do it. Here's what we're gonna do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Andre had that ability. John Studd did not. So
that raises an interesting point. It's something I never talked to you about before, Ted. When you would get into the ring with Andre, I know that usually he was your tag team partner. Did you ever face him though?
You know what? I never did.
Never.
I never had a match against him.
Okay.
I was always his tag team partner, and that's smart. That's you don't want to get on the big man's bad side, and I think I don't think he didn't like Jake for some reason.
So Andre had an issue with Jake apparently right out of the gate. So from the way that Jake tells it, they climbed into the ring the first time as they were starting their program actually during this period, late 88 into 89. And Jake said, I got into the ring with him the first time and he just ate me up. He didn't give me anything. You're out in the ring, you can't exactly take anything from him either. So like he just wouldn't give me anything, just ate me alive out there. So apparently Jake stormed into his locker room afterwards and confronted him and said, hey, look, we can have shitty matches all through this program, or you and I can work together and make this something good. And I guess Andre respected it. And after that, he and Jake had no issues, but he did like to rib Jake in the ring, and he would he'd get him pinned down and fart on him or step on his hair and then pull his arm.
Yeah. I was Andre's partner. Yeah. When he was doing that, Jake had that long hair, and he'd stand on his hair and he'd say, get up. Jake's going,
Such a mean rip. What can you do about it?
Nothing.
You're like a plaything in this guy's hand. I am curious though. What I was driving toward before was when you're in the ring with Andre, whether a tag team partner or whatever, who calls the match? Does Andre call it, or does a more technical guy like Jake?
Well, it's again, and I understood that. I mean, when I'm Andre's partner, Andre is limited as to what he can do. So I'm the guy that's got to be in the match and capable of taking the bumps and bouncing around the ring, especially if you're the heels, and of course I was always a heel, and so was he. I mean, with in the WWE when he turned heel, and he and I are partners, and but somebody's got to get beat up, and of course that was me. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're the bump taker.
When it came time, for the baby face to make the hot tag, and come in and clean house, I had to be the guy to take the bumps because Andre couldn't take that many bumps. So, and that was understood. I mean, that's just logical.
Right.
So,
he's not going to be out there bouncing around the ring.
No. But I had no problem with Andre ever.
But it sounds like he respected you, and grew to respect Jake.
Yeah.
On the way to the Rumble, you're making the loop with Hercules and beating him every night with a little help from Virgil. But on December 26th in Toronto, Hercules is going to have some travel issues, and instead, you're going to face Sam Houston. And Sam is, of course, the brother of Jake Roberts and a second-generation wrestler like yourself. Ted, what can you tell us about your impressions of Sam Houston and his ring work?
When I first, again, I've known him since before he, got in the ring. When I was working for Bill Watson and Grizzly Smith, who's his father, was the agent, so to speak. Sam was around then, but he was okay. I mean, again, he was very young, when I was around him, and and he's just starting out in the business, but I thought he was okay. He was decent. He wasn't, he wasn't bad. It was like, I wouldn't thumb my nose at him. That's for sure.
Compared to Jake, though, not exactly the same kind of second generation chemistry that you had with Jake.
No, I don't think so.
About a week after you defeat Sam Houston, you'll step into the ring with one half of the Young Stallions, Paul Roma, for a TV match. Paul is one of those names that we will likely never bring up on this show again. So let's take full advantage right now. Paul had a great look, fantastic build, seemed to be pretty good in the ring. What did you think of him?
Yeah, I mean, he was, I didn't, obviously I didn't think he was like the greatest of all time, but I mean, he was a good worker. He was a good, solid worker. But I don't know that if I just don't know that I would ever have, it's one of those guys who I didn't think I respected his work, but he was never going to be a superstar.
He's one of those guys that, like a lot of times we like hear some of these gimmicks and we're just like, like Harley Race is a great example. We just talked about him where it's like, it would have been great to have seen territory Harley Race here in the WWF. Paul Roma, on the other hand, like he's just a dude. He's just Paul Roma. And I feel like a guy like that with his build and his look, like he would really benefit from having kind of more of an over the top character that people could really sink their teeth into, Yeah. So probably a missed opportunity with him because, like I said, the guy looks like $1 million. An 8x10 of that guy, you're like, hey, that guy's a star. He looks like somebody.
And he was a good, solid worker.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it was kind of like I don't know. I would much rather be in the ring with Paul Roma than who?
I think I have an idea who you might be referring to. And well, actually, that person is the next subject that we're about to move on to, if you can believe it. So at the Royal Rumble, we've got a couple of other guys with great physiques who are about to go at it. The Ultimate Warrior, who I assume is who you were talking about, and Rick Rude are squaring off at this event, but it's not in a match. Instead, Ted, they're going to have a pose down here to determine the better physique. Ted, I asked Jim and Jake this question, so now I'll ask you. You came from the territories, blood and guts stuff in Mid-South, and the loaded glove, and a second generation star, all this background that you have, and now here you are. It's a pay-per-view. It's a pretty big money slot if you boil it down to dollars and cents, the amount of TV time they're using up, and it's a pose down with a couple oiled up guys flexing at each other. Ted, what did you think about this?
I was like, it was kind of like, really. I mean, this is what we're going to do here. We're not going to have a match. We're going to have a pose down. Oh man, it was like. But again, of course that was the old school me speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like even now as I got older, it took me a long time as I got older and matured and looked back and at some of these things, it was kind of like this is the way I was taught. This is this is the way wrestling should be, and but Vince McMahon had a different vision. And to his credit, it worked. it's kind of like everything changes, over time. It's just, it's kind of like, because of my mentality and how I've been raised in the business and everything. And, it's kind of like we used to do the Kayfabe thing. Kayfabe that meant, keep your mouth shut. If you're in a program with a guy, don't ever let anybody see you guys like riding in the same car and all that stuff. You know that it's a show, but you treat it like it's real as far as the public is concerned. And that's how, that was my mindset. Now, Vince is coming along and basically said, look, yeah, we're sports entertainment. So what? We're good.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you how good. And so he took wrestling to a place that, I never envisioned. And to his credit, I mean, we wouldn't be doing this podcast if it hadn't been for Vince McMahon and what he did for my career. I mean, and for wrestling 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome.
Wow, insane.
WrestleMania 3. I mean, wrestling draws the largest indoor crowd ever for anything. That's pretty impressive.
It shows you that there's demand for it. And to your point, criticize this pose down as much as you want. And certainly I do. I view it as a fan, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like if I was watching this on pay-per-view and I paid money for this, I'd be like, come on, can we just have some wrestling or something? That being said, after this is Warrior's on the biggest run of his career. Following this, he's selling all kinds of merch, and fans are coming out to see him. He's going to be world champion here in a year. So it's like Vince is doing something correct with the way that he's marketing this guy. Also, I have to imagine that having Warrior out there posing is better than having him in a match, right?
Yes. He's a much better poser than he was a wrestler.
So we'll give him that.
Yeah.
Ted, let's get to our first clip this week. You pull a random number and maybe aren't quite so happy with the results. We're going to share the link to this clip in the description so everybody can watch it.
Well, the time has finally arrived for the $1 million hand to pick the $1 million number. And the winning number is... wait a minute. Slick.
Hey, what's up, man? What's up,
Slickster, listen, I got a question for you. When you picked your numbers for your voice today, were you happy with it?
Brother, unbelievable.
That happy, huh?
Hey, man, exactly.
Well, let's go talk this over. I got something to talk to you about. That's real important.
What's up, man?
Gentlemen, excuse me. Gentlemen.
Oh boy, you're up to something there. Man, such a character. And I mean, such great character stuff for you here, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. And was that a gold suit I was wearing?
No, that was sparkly green.
Sparkly green? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Sparkly green.
Hell of a suit and hell of a very distinct, identifiable look that you've got there. I mean, when it comes to something like this, Ted, we always hear that guys like Jim Duggan and Arn Anderson, they would get given creative and they're just like, yep, no problem. Like, yeah, whatever you say, I don't care. And, not really guys that make suggestions. They're just like, okay, this is what you want. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. Yeah. Were you like that? Or were you every once in a while saying like, hey, can I throw my 2 cents in on this? Or, hey, what if we change this to this?
Well, by and large, most of the time I was like the rest of the guys, because I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's kind of like there's no bargaining power. I mean, wrestling, regional wrestling died. If you left the WWF, where are you going to go? You didn't have any place else to go as a wrestler. So if you want to keep your job, then you do what you're told. And that's basically, that's where Vince had everybody. Back in the regional days, back when you could, like if you were working, like for Georgia Championship Wrestling and and they asked you to do something that you didn't want to do, or you felt like you were being mistreated, you could just give your notice and go to another territory. Well, now there was nowhere else to go. Now, for me, I did have one place I could go, and I could have gone back to Japan. But I mean, I got treated really well. I mean, my gosh, they ran with my character, I mean, for a long time. I mean, as a top heel, I was probably one of the top heels for the longest run of anybody.
Yep. Probably the most identifiable mainstream heel that's ever been established. It's you. And by the way, I want our listeners to kind of hear that. Like, you were much like Jim and Arn saying, yep, yeah, whatever you want. Yeah, let's just do it. And I'll do it to the best of my ability. And all three of these guys have had very, very long careers. So there's something to be said for just like, okay, that's what you want to do. Maybe I don't agree with it, but I'm just going to do it as well as I can. And let's see how it goes. So it's, I know a lot of fans are like, oh, well, he should have said no to that gimmick, or like, I think I can do better. No, not necessarily. Sometimes you just got to do what you're told.
Well, again, and as I just explained to everybody, okay, you don't like it. Well, quit. Where are you going to go?
Man, there were still a couple territories, but they were, and Turner's getting ready to buy, or maybe they have bought. I think they have. The WCW is an option at this time, but the other options are like Jerry Jarrett's promotion, WCCW, and it's like not a ton of money going around down there.
Yeah. You weren't going to make any money there.
Right. Yeah. So you better just run the play.
Yeah.
All right, so we're not wasting any time before we get to our final clip this week. You would successfully purchase the number 30 spot in the Rumble, and when it comes down to the end, it's just yourself, Akeem, and Big John Studd in there. Let's have a look.
Say it one more time. Oh, look at that! Whoa! Big John pulled the $1 Million Man right in front of him. Big John Studd. Oh, look at that! Akeem is gone. It's Big John Studd, the $1 Million Man. If I was the $1 Million Man, I'd try to buy off Studd right now. I don't like DiBiase's chances right now. He's saying, wait a minute. Look at, he's showing him the money. Oh, and Studd's not going for it. DiBiase looking for some money, perhaps to bribe this. You're not going to bribe Big John Studd. Hey, everybody's got their price, Gorilla. He could throw you a fib and get you to go for anything. Stop. This is what it's all about. He suckered him in close enough to get an eye rake, but oh, look at that. Right by the throat. Oh. Big John Studd extremely confident right now. I don't think DiBiase can hurt this guy. He did well when Akeem was in there with him, but look out now. Whoa. Big John Studd just measuring the $1 Million Man. Scoops him up. Big body slam. John's having a good time, Jess. Yeah, John better not get too confident. Double arm suplex. Look at this. Hooked him down underneath. I've never seen Big John Studd do that before. Neither have I. Big smile on his face. Extremely confident. Suplex. Gut-wrench suplex. Threw him away like a piece of garbage. Big John Studd takes him in for the ride. Hey, whoa. I'll tell you something, though, Gorilla. As bad as it looks for the $1 Million Man right now, don't count him out yet. Why? Because Virgil's still out there? No, because he's a darn good wrestler. Oh, no!
So just as Jesse is saying, like, hey, don't count him out. Oh, never mind. He's gone. But, man, I don't think you got any offense on Big John Studd there at the end. He just kind of dog-whipped you and threw you out the ring.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, I was, of course, the people loved it. Yeah, that was the whole deal.
That's it. You got to send folks home happy. And, it's look, you may not necessarily agree that this guy's going to be a future superstar, but you're given a job to do. You got to shine this baby face, and you
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. I mean, based on his look and his character, could you see him going on to have success, or did you know, like, this guy just doesn't have enough under the hood?
Well, I mean, he would have some success, but I mean, it wouldn't be long. I wouldn't say he would have a long run.
Well, you're right. He went 6 months. He was gone here in June 1989.
Yeah, and that's because his capabilities. There's only so much you can do with him.
That's it. So Ted, before we wrap this one up, I also did want to mention that the plans are beginning to form here for Mania 5 in many respects. Namely, the Mega Powers will have an issue here that will start their breakup and lead them down the road to the main event 2, where Savage will accuse Hogan of having lust in his eyes for Liz, which is a hilarious line. Ted, this is a year-long storyline with these two. It's finally starting to come to a head. What's your take on super long storylines like this? Good stuff, or should angles be reduced to something like 6 months at a maximum?
Well, it just depends on who it is, and I would say it depends on the talent and are they capable of keeping it going. And if they're capable of keeping it going and keeping the interest of the people, will go. It was like one of the things I was that started happening that I didn't like was there was like some of the storylines were just too short. It's kind of like I don't know. You could, back in the territorial days, man, you get a heel that could come in, and he would rule the roost for a long time. I mean, it was it would take a long time to get to that place where you have the big blow off, if you know what I mean.
And to your point, it's you had been paired here with Hercules, and now like that's essentially over after this. Hercules is moving on to I don't know what, and I think you're going to be moving on to Brutus the Barber Beefcake for Mania. So it's like, you've got a really short storyline where Hogan and Savage have been building this thing for a year, and a lot of fans, Ted, consider this Mega Power storyline the greatest storyline in the history of wrestling. We've talked about a lot of your stuff over the years and over the course of the podcast, and some of your great storylines. Objectively, do you feel that the Mega Power storyline is the greatest storyline ever told in wrestling?
Well, gosh, I don't know. I mean, it was good. Obviously, it was good, and it was financially good because it worked. But yeah, I mean, the greatest angle of all time. How do you do that? I don't even know what that would be. So
it's a tough question to think about the greatest storyline of all time. When I asked Jake that question, he was like, "Oh, I don't know what there's so many. It's hard to even kind of consider it.
So many different things we did."
Right. So and I don't know. I'm gonna give it.
It's kind of like let's go back to Mid-South and who's that in the gorilla suit?
See, now that's good stuff. That's an underrated storyline. I can't wait for us to talk about that. We will, folks, coming up sometime.
All right.
The blow-up to your rivalry with Hercules will take place at the main event 2, when you'll win by pinfall after Hercules is tripped by Virgil. Kind of an underwhelming way to end the rivalry after you tried to enslave this dude sometime earlier. But the feud felt like it was kind of treading water. I know you liked Ray, but were you glad to move on from this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, because it was not, Ray was a good guy and had a great, oh my gosh, he looked like Hercules.
Yeah.
But he was, I guess he wasn't like, he was a fair worker, but I wouldn't class him as a great worker. So.
And I'm sure that you guys are having fine matches, but man, if the machine isn't getting behind you and kind of, priming the crowd for like a great story, like it started with, hey, I'm going to try to enslave this guy. Okay, that's pretty compelling. But then after that, it's like, okay, where did it go? And nothing, you guys just fought each other on the house shows.
Yeah.
So it really kind of didn't go anywhere. I personally, as I'm watching it back, I'm like, glad that one's over. Well,
and I'm not sure that they wanted it to go anywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know in terms of, I mean, because like it was one of those storylines that where I came out on top.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when the bad guy comes out on top, then that's the whole deal. Vince is now marketing the product that he's trying to target children and a younger audience. He's now into selling merchandise, action figures, video games, and so what are the kids really into? They're heroes.
Yes.
But for every hero, there's got to be a bad guy for the hero to beat up on. I have this thing with Hercules, and I come out on top, which just it's kind of like it keeps me at a certain level in the eyes of the people. You know what I mean?
Got it. So you don't need a strong storyline. The idea is simply that you're trying to take advantage of this guy and you end up getting the better of him. And now that you've got a bunch of heat, so you can move on to the next guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm with it. That makes a lot more sense and kind of gives me a new appreciation for that rivalry.
Yeah.
Well, sadly, during the March to Mania in 1989, Paul Bosch is going to pass away after a heart attack. Ted, what can you tell us about your time around Paul and thoughts of him as a promoter and as a man?
Oh my gosh, yeah, Paul Bosch was great. I mean, he was a World War II veteran, and had, I heard stories that he had been in some serious battles, with Germany when he was a soldier. But as a promoter, Houston was one of the greatest places to go. And, it's kind of like, because Paul had the reputation of being a very fair promoter, especially if you're in the main event, you're going to get paid very well. And you're going to get paid well, based on where you are on the card. But that's the rep that Paul Bosch had. And so, yeah, I can't think of anybody that didn't like Paul Bosch.
Jake has, had his fair share of troubles with Vince, with Bill Watts, a lot of promoters along the way. Jake loved Paul Bosch, sings his praises every time he gets brought up. So, yeah. And by the way, Paul Bosch, he wrote some books about his experiences in World War II. Yeah. So, folks, I would recommend you go find them. They're out there. I think you can actually get one of them for free right now on like a Kindle or something. So go and find Paul Bosch's books, because, man, that guy's got a hell of a story.
And Houston, although Houston, I guess, was technically part of, I don't know what it was before Bill Watts came along, and I don't know what kind of deal that he and Bill made, but I mean, Houston became part of Mid-South. Yes. And and I don't know what that deal was, but I know that I always liked to go into Houston. And it was in Houston where, I got to be real good friends with Bruce Pritchard. Yes. And Bruce had worked for Paul for years, kind of, I mean, say years, I don't know how many years, but like you say worked for him. Like they would go out and put the cards out and all that other stuff and help promote the shows. So him and his brother.
Yeah, Paul Bosch allowed Bruce Pritchard as a very, very young man to come in and work for him in like his office. And that Bruce is still working in pro wrestling today, all due to Paul Bosch. Yeah. Well, there's another big piece of news from this time that I spoke to Jake about, and I would love to hear your opinion on it, Ted. It's pretty controversial stuff. We've got this from the 2/20/1989 Observer. The big media story in wrestling this week is that the ultimate kayfabe violation has taken place, courtesy of Titan Sports and Vince and Linda McMahon. Titan admitted that pro wrestling was fake and that the competitors do everything they can to avoid hurting one another in a New Jersey State Senate hearing on Thursday in hopes of getting pro wrestling taken away from the authority of the State Athletic Commission. And so state law would no longer mandate a doctor in attendance at ringside during pro wrestling exhibitions. Like, I understand that Vince is trying to conduct a business and avoid, fees and hassle where he can. But I mean, having a doctor at ringside seems like a pretty valuable thing in a sport like wrestling, doesn't it?
And I agree with you. It's like even though wrestling is sports entertainment, it's still sport. and you're still out there bouncing around a ring, and yes, you do get hurt, something, and a lot, but to me, it was kind of like, I didn't really look at it as that big a deal, because the whole kayfabe thing, that's like, I would say this. I don't think anybody quit going to the wrestling matches because they found out that it wasn't real.
I agree. And wrestling, look, everybody nowadays knows that wrestling is a work, but it's more popular and making more money than it ever has.
And that's just it, but like sometimes, like with my father and Funk and Amarillo, they actually accidentally ran into each other in a restaurant in Amarillo with their wives and got into a fight. I mean, because the whole town know that Funk Senior and Iron Mike were at each other's throat, and all of a sudden they show up at the same restaurant, and they started fighting in there and went out on the street. And, it was kind of funny.
Boy, how pissed would the wives be? They're just trying to sit down and have some dinner.
That'll ruin your night, won't it?
Right, trying to just go out for a night.
But
Lord.
Yeah, I don't think that it really, because everybody, pretty much everybody, if you'd ever been in a real fight and you watch two guys wrestling, but by the same token, the guys like myself, I tried to make it as realistic as possible. So I tried not to do things that were just blatantly. It's kind of like I've seen guys grab, get somebody in the corner and beat them up, and then grab them by the hair and run them all the way across the ring and run their head in the turnbuckle.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in a real fight and somebody's beating up on you, do you think he could grab you by your hair and run you across the street into a lamppost?
Probably.
He might pull your hair out, but you ain't going. You know what I'm saying? And
yes.
Things like that. But some, like I said, some of the greatest matches I've seen that were so realistic were with the greats. I mean, Dory Funk Jr. I always talk about this match. Dory Funk Jr. and Jack Briscoe.
Great one.
Oh my gosh. I mean, on the mat, in and out of, and so very real. I mean, I've been smart to the business since I was, 15 years old, and I'm standing on my feet during this match because, again, when you walk into a movie theater, it's a movie, but if the actors, what do the actors do? They draw you into the story you're telling.
Yep.
And they can make you laugh. They can make you cry. They can make you mad. They can make you sad. Same thing with wrestling, sports entertainment. But that's not to say that what we do and some of the things we do aren't dangerous, and the bumps we take are very real. I mean, yes, we're landing on a surface that is, like a good wrestling ring has just a little bit of bounce in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been, I've been bounced all over a ring, and I've taken slams on the concrete floor, things like that. But I mean, by and large, it's kind of like, don't write it off like, oh, that's just pro wrestling. Yeah, we've had guys that came out of the NFL. I thought that, well, I can't play football anymore, but I can be a wrestler. Well, a lot of those guys found out real quick, they couldn't cut it.
There have been a lot of pro athletes that have tried wrestling and quit after the first training session. So, yep, it is not for everybody.
No.
And man, it's look, the kayfabe violation by Vince, a pretty high profile one, but by the same token, he was also very clearly morphing pro wrestling into entertainment, as you and I have discussed before. So it's I don't think it's the end
and
of the
basically
world.
what Vince was saying is, yes, we're sports entertainment. So what?
Mm-hmm.
We're good.
Yeah, you're entertained. So look, this is one of the hottest periods in wrestling history. WrestleMania 5, the mega powers explode. So I don't think he heard anything.
Yeah. And now I will say this. When I first heard it, I was kind of old school and like, why would you do that? But when I had time to think about it, it made all the sense in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, despite this situation, there is a big positive for you at this time, as you're getting some pretty fun creative along the way here with the $1 Million Championship idea coming to fruition. You'll swing by a jewelry store in Greenwich, Connecticut, and tell them you want the most glorious belt ever created. Ted, we discussed it before, but let's give the listeners just kind of a short little reminder. Who came up with the idea, and what did you think of the idea of the $1 Million belt?
Well, okay. WrestleMania 4, and I think what they were trying to do is appease a lot of people. I think originally WrestleMania 4, because I was the main heel they were pushing at the time, was maybe going to be me and Hogan, and I beat Hogan and I have the belt for a while. But then obviously, if you're a heel in the new WWF, you're not going to be the champion very long, because kids want to see the champion, their champion, the good guy, have the belt. And so, originally, I think that's what it was supposed to be. And I don't know what issues that they had with Randy at the time, but anyway, so it was Pat Patterson who came to me and let's say, hey, Ted, it's just like, and basically he said that. He says, we could do it this way. Or he says, let's just say, for example, that we, and I always loved, I call it making all the people out there that think they're smart to wrestling, and they're going to tell you, here, this is what's going to happen. I always liked making them go, holy shit, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And so Pat Patterson, he said, Ted, says, let's say this doesn't go the way that a lot of people may predict that it's going to go, and you don't win. You end up in the last match, but you end up with Randy Savage, and Randy Savage, you up until that point had been a heel, and he wins, and that basically turned him babyface. And you have your run with Randy, and he says, but here's the deal. But in your arrogance, you basically say, I don't need your stinking belt. I'll create my own championship, and I'll defend it every week. And that was the whole idea behind the $1 Million Championship. For me to just say, here, you want a real belt? Here's a real belt. And so that's how the whole $1 Million Championship thing came to pass. And of course, Vince does everything big. And like, this belt was not just, now, if you go buy a replica belt, I think you can buy, I don't know how much mine costs now. I think somebody said maybe $300 or $400. But this belt that they had made, all the stones in the face of the belt were what they call cubic zirconium. And I didn't know what a cubic zirconium was. And I asked my wife, and she goes, it's almost a diamond.
Okay.
And I said, okay, almost a diamond. So it's not a diamond, but it got great value. And I think, so in the face of the belt, like the big dollar sign and then the one on each side, the smaller ones, I think there were 700 cubic zirconiums.
Wow.
$50 a piece.
That's an awful lot of money.
$35,000.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That is not a cheap belt.
Times $50 a piece is $35,000. And that's just the smaller ones. But and because its estimated value in 1980 when they had it made, it was $40,000. And I had to carry, like when I would go over to Europe or something,
mm-hmm.
then I had to carry a declaration page, so when I went through customs, so they would know what I had and what it was worth.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah.
Man. So, I mean, nowadays that belt has got to be worth even more. The
I have
one that
no
you carry.
idea. You know,
Yeah.
it would be, yeah, it's like, yeah, that'd be interesting. I'd love to find out. I mean, I don't know what it would be, but I don't know how much a little bitty cubic zirconium like that would go for now.
Here's the other thing that you've got to consider is like that was on TV and you held it and guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin held it. It was involved in some major angles with Jake and with Virgil. And so like this now the belt's value has gone up because of the exposure that the belt had as well. So the exact belt itself is probably worth, I would say, upwards of $100,000 or more.
Yeah, I would think so.
Man, absolutely wild. Well, look,
I wish I had it. That's the first question. Now I always take my replica with me to take pictures with the fans, and I go, "Is that the real belt?" I said, "No." I said, "I wish it was, but it's not."
Well, if you happen to swing by the Hall of Fame this weekend, you got to tell Hunter, like, "Hey, man, I should really have that belt."
Well, this is what's funny. On the back of the real belt, there are at the very, very, very top of the belt are 3 diamonds on the back, real diamonds. And I saw that and I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Those are real diamonds." And I said, "Nobody can see them. Why?" He said, "Well, Ted, if anybody ever asks you, are the diamonds in the belt real? You can say yes, and you won't be lying."
Smart.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Smart, man. Yeah. It's some next level. Who would think of that? Only the chairman.
Yep.
Well, before the audience gets to have a look at this glorious belt of yours, we get to see you react to it in the jewelry store in a clip that I saw, and I was like, well, I just have to include this because it's here we go.
Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod. It's the $1 million.
You're just making a damn scene in that jewelry store.
Oh, Mark, it's you know what, and I love it. But I tell everybody, I tell people this all the time. I said, I had almost a 20-year active wrestling career. I did a lot of stuff. I had this belt and that belt, and I had tag team champions, and I've been in a lot of great matches and what have you. But of all the things that I've done, what is the one thing everybody remembers about the $1 million belt, the $1 million man? Damn laugh.
Dude, I mean that, and what really kind of made that whole thing come together is, first of all, Virgil is in the background just not reacting, just like straight faced. But then the guy across the counter from you, like, you're just laughing your head off and being a maniac, and he's just like stone faced too. It's, man, it was just fantastic. And look, that kind of thing to me, like the over-the-top nature of this makes me think that Vince would have been present to produce it. Is that an accurate assumption?
Well, he wasn't present to produce it, but again, Bruce Pritchard. Bruce Pritchard and Bruce and I had been buddies, met in Houston and everything, and he was with me in the jewelry store. He was with me all those the first vignettes that they saw when I kicked the kids out of the swimming pool.
Yeah.
I kicked the honeymoon couple out of the honeymoon suite because it was the best room in the hotel.
Right.
I kicked a bunch of people out of a restaurant or something.
You went to the emergency room to get a Band-Aid at one point.
Yeah. Bruce was with me for all of that.
Man, he's a great producer by all accounts. Yeah. Now, I mean, Ted, this is these vignettes. Would you say that you're doing them in one take, or would Bruce take a lot of time to go back?
Oh, we took time to do them. I mean, we didn't do we thought it. We did. I don't know how much time it took to do all of them, but we didn't do but 1 or 2, maybe a day. Sometimes it would take a day just to get one done.
Okay.
So you know, it's depending where you are. We did most of those in Houston. It's where we were.
Well, and man, that was something else. I love the cheesiness of it and how over the top you were. You're wearing a cape, which is just ridiculous, and you're just laughing your head off.
That was Vince's cape.
That was Vince McMahon's cape.
Yes.
Why in the world does Vince McMahon have a cape?
I don't know. Dracula.
Well, it worked. It looked great. And man, that is a really hilarious scene. I was laughing out loud as I was watching it, thinking about getting to watch it with you. So that was great. The audience is finally going to get a look at the belt on the Brother Love show on March 6th. And the look has become absolutely iconic, this belt and that design. Ted, when you first saw the design of the $1 million belt, what did you think of it?
Well, I thought it was great. Well, I tell you, the one thing I thought when the first thing when they showed it to me, the big dollar, the really big dollar sign,
mm-hmm.
You know, there was the really big one, and then maybe half of that size on each side next to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at first they had the smaller one as the metal one, and I went, that's not going to work. I said, that's too small. I just told him, I said, that dollar sign is not big enough. And so they changed it, and now and made it big enough.
Gotcha. So initially it was one of those smaller ones was in the middle with two even smaller ones on each side of it.
Yeah.
That's more of a $500,000 belt.
Yeah.
So at the time you see this belt, and you know, obviously this object is going to be tied to you for the rest of your career. Even to this day, people associate that belt with you and you with that belt. At the time, did you think like, hey, this is going to be something for the rest of my career? Or did you think like, it's just like a short-term angle type thing?
I never really thought about it. It's kind of like, at the time I didn't, but obviously as time has gone on and everything, that's what I'm associated with. I mean, it's kind of like I've gone through several replica belts.
All right. Well,
people love to take pictures with the belt.
I mean, who wouldn't? You got the $1 million man standing right there. You're holding the belt. I mean, come on. If you guys aren't going to wrestle,
actually, what I do with the fans is I put the belt on their shoulder so they get a chance to have it for a minute.
They're the $1 million champion for like 30 seconds.
Belt back, yeah.
Well, you're going to do a double count out with Bret Hart in the build up to Mania. And we've talked a lot about the great chemistry you had with Bret, but it's also of note here that on Saturday night's main event that will air this exact same month, you'd work a match with Owen Hart, with Owen under a mask as the Blue Blazer. And this match got rave reviews despite the fact that it goes under 4 minutes. Ted, what can you tell us about working with Owen Hart?
Owen was great. I'm telling you, Owen was a pleasure to work with, and the tragedy of what eventually happened to him is so sad. I mean, because he had so much potential, and in real life, he was a real funny guy. I mean, he was a ribber, a ribber meaning a jokester. He would play ribs on people, and everybody in the dressing room would get to laugh at it, whatever it was. But just a great guy, and it was just so sad that he died like he did.
Man, especially in a ring, on pay-per-view. I mean, the circumstances just could not have been more awful. I mean, anytime you lose somebody, especially at his age, it's such a tragedy. But man, it's so publicly just terrible. And then, guys had to go out afterwards and continue wrestling. In this match where, like, I know that Jeff Jarrett had to go out there, and it's like his friend just died, and he had to go work a match. Yeah. Now, would you say that you had the same kind of second generation wrestler chemistry with Owen that you had with Bret?
Yeah. He was. And I, you got to be different, you can't, you can't be you can't be exactly who your brother was. So he was, he had his own unique style. So
He did, and he was amazing at it. And I do want to know, I know that you were saying Owen was a ripper and he was fun to be around backstage. Would you say that you considered Owen a friend or more of just like a business associate?
oh, I considered him a friend. I mean, like we weren't bosom buddies or anything, but it was. I loved it when he would pull his pranks, and I laughed louder than anybody.
Man, some of those stories are absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, some of that stuff wasn't always in the dressing room either. There's some stories about stuff that he had done, like on an airplane.
All right, anything stick out that you can share with us?
Not that I can talk about.
That's probably the smart move.
Yeah.
Well, look, Owen's not the only one that you're apparently putting on a wrestling clinic with. I mean, like I said, you worked with Brett, but now also in the lead up to Mania, you're going to work with and defeat Tim Horner in a match that Meltzer would call one of the best TV squash matches in years. Tim Horner is not likely a name that will come up often. What can you tell us about White Lightning, Tim Horner?
Tim Horner and I are really good friends. And, we don't see each other often now, but back when we were, both working for Bill Watts, that's where Tim and I became friends. And, I mean, Tim was one of those guys who, I mean, he had it. He was really good, but he just never became he never became a big star. It was, I don't know, he good in the ring, but maybe not so good on the mic. I'm just not sure. And a lot of things in wrestling are timing too. Mm-hmm. And again, he wasn't really big. He wasn't like a super body on him or anything like that. What I had was size. I didn't have a super body either. I mean, I always looked like an athlete, but I hated that muscle bound look. I mean, that's like, you look like you should be in a posing show instead of in the ring sometimes.
Right. And your thing was more about having good matches, which Tim was capable of.
Yeah.
I think that guys like Tim and, Jake and I were just talking about Terry Taylor a little bit, like guys like that, like, Terry had he had the ring skills, but did he have that X factor? Maybe not.
Yeah, and I agree. Jake is right. I mean, Terry Taylor knows the business. I mean, even now, I think Terry is one of the guys who's an instructor down in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
And Terry and I have been friends for a long time, and a hell of a worker. But just, the charisma, the over the top, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly.
Just didn't have it.
And I think that a guy like Tim Horner probably suffered from the same thing. Technically great, or like a Bobby Eaton is another good example.
Yeah,
technically sound, great worker. Everybody loves him, but just maybe doesn't have that X factor charisma.
Yeah. Charisma. You either have it or you don't. You can't teach it to anybody.
That's it, man. And it's a shame because a guy like Tim Horner, it's like, man, I bet he would have put on some clinic matches with other guys, but he's got to have the opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into your feud with Beefcake. It's kind of a cold rivalry, as you would just kind of randomly get paired with him after your issue with Hercules came to an end. And on top of that, you're putting him over on the house shows on the way to Mania. And in one instance, Ted, the Ultimate Warrior is going to defeat you in 30 seconds in the middle of this house show run. So it feels like they're putting a lot of juice behind you with this $1 million belt idea. And I mean, that idea is certain to get you heat, especially the way that you're presenting it. Like, I don't need that belt. This is the real belt.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're having you lose on the way to this big event? Do you think it hurt you at all?
The thing about a good heel is, the one that I didn't like at all was having to put the Warrior over in 30 seconds.
Right.
That was, to me, that was a little bit insulting.
It's like the junk food equivalent of wrestling, where it's like it doesn't do anything for anybody. I don't think it makes Warrior look particularly good. He's just beats you in 30 seconds, and certainly doesn't make you look very good.
No.
But yeah, I don't know. It just feels weird to me that you've got this belt and you are sure to get a ton of heat, and now all of a sudden they're
But
just like,
I guess here's the other thing to consider, though, as I'm looking back at that. I had one of the longest runs of any heel they've had.
mhm.
You know, I can remember, Bruce and I talking about it. I mean, it's just, man. And it's just like, you just, you cannot stay on top like that forever.
So here's what's ironic about you putting on wrestling clinics with guys like Brett, Owen, and Tim Horner during this time. It's reported in the Observer that you were great in the matches with Beefcake, but could still, and these are Meltzer's words,
Yeah.
he says, even you with your skills, you could still only carry Beefcake to a decent match. Now, did you feel like you were doing all the heavy lifting in these matches, or is Brutus better than he's being given credit for here?
Again, Brutus was a good worker. I don't put Brutus out there as a great. He was, he had a good spot. He had a good run. He had some charisma, but it's kind of like at different levels. And I think he was at the level that he was at. And I don't think he was ever going to get any higher than that.
I think he maximized his position on the card, and that's mid card, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good spot.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's get to Mania. We've talked about the Mega Powers and their 1 year storyline already. So if listeners feel like they're missing a crucial piece of this story, go back and check out our Survivor Series 1988 and Royal Rumble 1989 episodes in the archives. For right now, I'd like to get to your match and this report from the Observer. So again, this is what Meltzer had to say about the match. Ted DiBiase went to a double countout with Brutus Beefcake in 10:01. I've been trying to find a nice thing to say about Beefcake, and here it goes. He's got cool entrance music. DiBiase was nothing short of great here, but once again, the lack of heat was embarrassing. This actually would have been a good match if the crowd would have reacted like it should have, and decent if the crowd simply would have reacted to something. The match was technically and psychologically good. They went outside the ring and did an anticlimactic finish. Beefcake then beat both Ted and Virgil up after the match, and they scattered when he pulled out the scissors. So not well liked by Meltzer, but he did put you over in there, so that's nice. Coming off of, Mania the year prior, which is probably one of the pinnacles of your career with Savage at WrestleMania 4, the belt on the line, stuff like that. Here you are, you're back in Trump Plaza a year later, and you kind of got this really kind of cold match. Would you say that you were frustrated, or was it just, it's a transition rivalry and you felt okay about it?
I understood overall that I was I'm one of their top heels.
Okay.
And there's only, you can't be the top guy all the time.
Yeah.
You've got to go down maybe a prong or two until there's something else, until your time comes around again. It's like you just said, it was like 4 years later that me and Rotunda now are the World Wrestling Federation tag team champions, and we wrestle Hogan and Beefcake in the main event. And, and I don't know much, I know, I know that Beefcake and the Hulkster were pretty tight, and I don't know how much that had to do with it.
I'm sure it had everything to do with the fact that you're working with him here. He and Hogan are buddies, and Hogan, I'm sure, is pushing for him to have good matches, and he knows that for him to have a good match, he's probably got to work with a ring veteran like yourself.
Yeah.
Just my thoughts. I don't know. I wasn't there. I was 2 years old at this time, Ted.
Oh gosh! Right in the heart.
Sorry, man. I had to throw that in there. Well, I called it a transition rivalry because later on this same night, you'll do a run-in during Jake's match, and we've got to watch this very short clip for full context on what happens next.
And Jake is untying from the outside, the $1 Million Man. Here's Where's he going with this? Oh, I love it. DiBiase's made it a fair match. Look at this. Jake right after him, right on his tail. And now Andre going after Stud. And Jake caught up with the $1 Million Man and stopped him.
Okay, so it's just a short clip, and on the surface, there's not much to it. But Ted, did anything stick out to you about that moment between you and Jake?
Not really. Why?
So when Jake and I watched it, he told me on the latest episode of The Snake Pit, which is available right now, that he believes that this was a rib because you grabbed that snake and you ran way far away up the aisle with it, and he had to go and get the snake from you, beat you up, grab the snake, and haul it back to the ring after having just worked a match. So he's like, I guarantee this is a rib. He was like, and if Ted says it wasn't, he's lying. So I'll ask you, was it a rib, Ted?
I can't remember.
See, that's the right answer, folks, because he's not admitting it wasn't a rib.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was so funny when Jake pointed out, because I didn't see it at first, and Jake's like, he did that on purpose. He knew I was tired. He ran way up the aisle with that thing. Man, just great stuff, and it's going to mark the start of a rivalry between you and Jake here. Now, you guys are going to face off at the following WrestleMania, and it's because right after you and Jake start the rivalry, he's going to suffer an injury, and we're going to discuss that the next time we look back 35 years to 1989. Ted, today we are continuing our look back 35 years to 1989 to check in on what was going on with you between WrestleMania 5 and SummerSlam that year. There's a lot to cover, and next time we'll cover the topic, we'll be closer to SummerSlam season. So I'm excited to dig in on these notes on what was going on with you around the spring of 1989. I'm going to hit a couple quick bits of news and notes from the time before we get into what was going on with you during this period. First off, Ted, Tom McGee is going to debut under the Mega Man gimmick with Jimmy Hart as his manager. He doesn't last long with the Fed, but this is notable because he's going to go on to become something of like an internet legend. Apparently, back in '86, he and Bret Hart had such a good match that during Tom's early run with the WWF, that Vince McMahon thought Tom was his next Hulk Hogan. The tape was lost and the match was never seen, but apparently it was the only good match McGee had in the WWF. Ted, I say all that to say, is there any chance that you remember Tom McGee at all?
I'll be honest with you, I don't. I don't remember him. But I will say this: if the only good match he ever had was with Bret Hart, that's because of Bret Hart. That's because Bret Hart, who like me grew up in the business and is, he was one of the best. And he led him around by his nose, I'm sure, and told him everything to do. And that's why the guy had a good match.
I think Bret even said in his book that this guy couldn't walk across the ring without stumbling over his own feet. So it's, Bret had his working boots on that night. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw the picture of him there. It's a handsome guy, great look, very, very muscular physique, but apparently just didn't really have it. He just had the look that Vince was looking for.
Yeah.
If Vince was able to make it work, quote unquote, with the Ultimate Warrior, why do you think Warrior was the exception to the rule? Do you think the Warrior had enough charisma to get himself over, and that was the difference between a guy like him and Tom?
Yeah, because I don't even remember. I don't remember Tom, but the one thing, the one thing that the Warrior did have, he did have charisma. I mean, he'd get in front of that microphone and, he's like, after the interview's over, he'd go, I don't know what he said, but it was pretty exciting.
That's what I thought as a kid. You'd see this guy with face paint, and he's got giant bulging veins, and he's all pumped up. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting pumped up by it.
Yeah.
Well, another weird bit of news is a big change in character for Ronnie Garvin at this time, who, by the way, just arrived in late 1988. So he's still fresh to the company, and they're doing this with him. We have this from The Observer. They did an angle with Greg Valentine and Ron Garvin. They had a match on TV during the first hour in which Garvin pinned Valentine in an upset. During the second hour, they had a rematch in which the loser had to retire from wrestling. And in this case, Valentine pinned Garvin. During the third hour, Garvin debuted as a babyface referee. So Ted, do you remember Ronnie Garvin becoming a referee in the WWF? It became a big part of his gimmick.
You know, I don't remember that. I do remember Ron Garvin, and Ron Garvin was a good worker.
Yes.
I mean, real good worker. It's kind of, that's just, I don't know, it just kind of surprised me. Ronnie
It surprised
Garvin.
me too, and yeah, like I don't blame you. I wish I didn't have to remember it because it was dumb. You know, this is a guy that Jake has said on a number of occasions that Ronnie is the greatest worker he ever stepped into the ring with. Jake will go on record and as saying that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And he's built his reputation. Like, he's a former NWA world champion. He's a legitimate tough guy. And he's finally made it to the pinnacle of wrestling, right? The biggest stage in all of wrestling, the WWF. And they give him this shitty, stupid gimmick. They turn him into a ref. I don't know. Like, do you think that why do you think Vince wasn't ready to put the juice behind a guy like Ronnie? Any idea?
I don't have any idea. You know, it might be because back then Vince was all about big guys.
Mm.
You know, we didn't have very many, you know, like short guys. You might have some short wrestlers, but they were not your top of the echelon. You know, Jake was big, I was big, Hogan's big, obviously Andre. The Warrior. You know.
So all these big guys are floating around. Then Ronnie comes in, and Ronnie's really well built, but I think he goes maybe 5'10", 5'11", somewhere in there. Not a huge guy. So yeah, that could very well be it. And it does kind of feel like, you know, Vince, he's got this reputation that precedes him, that he kind of makes his mind up about somebody early on and then pigeonholes them accordingly. Yeah. Would you say that that's accurate? Like, Vince will just kind of put his stamp on somebody and say, this is where that guy is, and then he just stays there.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Unfortunate with Ronnie. I feel like there was a lot more meat on the bone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, oh my gosh, he was a really good worker. I have a good story about Ronnie. We were in, Ronnie's a pilot. Had his own airplane.
Yeah,
he didn't fly all the time, but I remember. We had a match in Alexandria, Louisiana, and I didn't even know how it came up, but he said he was flying back to Baton Rouge, and I said, you got any room on that plane for me? And he said, oh yeah. I had never flown with him. Well, when the promoter took us out to his plane, we're out in the middle of a field. I'm like, maybe I made a mistake. It was kind of like, where are the hell are we? And it literally, it was a road anyway, maybe a dirt road, but and what he did is we got in the plane, and he had the promoter go all the way back down and turn around and point his car at the plane and leave the headlights on, so Ronnie could use the headlights as his target.
Holy smokes, man.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever fly with him again?
No. To be honest with you, he was a great pilot. Obviously, he was a very good pilot. So
he ended up doing it for a living after he left the WWF.
He
like 13 years.
Like a mail something.
I know he was like a courier of some sort. Like he'd carry supplies and whatnot. So yeah,
whether it was U.S. Mail or UPS or something. Yeah, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, life after wrestling, man, can't exist.
Man.
All right. I think it's also of note at this time that the company is going to release their WWF Superstars arcade game. It'll be your first ever appearance on a video game, Ted. How did it feel to be part of a video game for the first time?
Well, kind of surreal. It's kind of like the first time I walked into whether it was a department store or whatever, and I saw my action figure. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like, wow. and I never envisioned that at all. But and oh gosh, since then, I mean, like now it's just unbelievable. I mean, they're still putting me in video games. I guess maybe I'm one of those. I don't know. They consider me. What would they consider me?
A legend, I think, on the game. So it's so it's not like modern day Ted on the game fighting people. It's the old $1 million man. So it's cool because WWE games are fun at this point because they can put you against whoever, Roman Reigns or John Cena or something like that.
Yeah.
So pretty fun. But here I've got this image from that game from 1989. There's you, Andre, and Virgil.
Wow.
So, pretty cool. Pretty fun to look at that stuff. And Ted, it makes me wonder, were you ever a gamer? Like, were you going out to the arcade to play this thing?
No.
So you never played the first game that you were on?
No.
Or any video game?
No.
Wow.
I mean,
now what about
I used to play pinball machines,
Okay.
When I was a kid, because there was a place very near where I lived in Omaha that, everybody would go, and they had a couple of pinball machines in there. So I played pinball, but not too much for the wrestling games. I just know that, because I still have fans coming up and telling me, that he says, you're on my video game, on my video game. And I guess they're still making video games because on my royalties, that's where I make the most money.
Nowadays.
Royalties.
Wow.
Always. I don't know about an arcade, like an arcade game in a building, the whole
Hard
thing.
to calculate
I
the
know what
amount
you're
of money
talking about. And that game, and I've got a great story about that.
Oh.
So my wife and I are in Hawaii, and I can't remember. They've got a little place, and they had a couple of video games in there, and one of the games was the WWF game, and there was this little black boy playing the game, and so I just walked up behind him very quietly, and he just started talking. Knock his head off, kill him, and so and as he's playing the game, he gives it like the quick look over the shoulder and back to the game. Then he just stops. He looks at me. He looks back at the machine. He looks at me, and he looks back to the machine. And he goes, "It's a miracle." I'm laughing my head off. He said, "Are you the $1 million man?" I said, "Yeah, buddy, I am." And he said, Can I get your autograph? And he, I said, absolutely. And so I signed him. I signed him the autograph. And but the drop the mic comes when he says to me, my dad's a celebrity too. And I said, who's your dad? And very famous basketball player. Guess.
Not Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan.
Wow.
And I said, can I meet your dad? And I did.
You got to go meet Michael Jordan after that.
Huh?
The son took you to go meet Michael.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
Man.
But I mean, that was just a killer. I mean, and he goes, yeah, my dad's a celebrity too. And I said, really? I said, who's your dad? I said, wow.
So you went from being like,
like the greatest basketball player of all time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only MJ. All of a sudden you're a fan and you're like, oh, can I get your dad's autograph now? Well, speaking of kids playing this game, your son Teddy is 6 years old at the time. Would you have taken him to play, or was he into playing his dad on video games?
I really can't remember. I mean, I know the kids had the games and stuff, but I don't know.
They'd probably get pissed at you and just beat up on your character on the game. Well, if you remember on our last episode about 1989, you would come out during Jake's match at WrestleMania 5 to attempt to steal Damien, and you would run way up the aisleway on what appeared to be a rib on Jake to blow him up, to force him to come chase you and the Snake. We'll follow that up with this unforgettable part of your rivalry with Jake, where he's supposed to have a match with you, but instead he gets a match with Virgil, and here's why. Okay, guys, I had to do a voiceover for this because there's some copyrighted music playing during this clip. You can find this on WWE Network. Of course, this is early 1989 with DiBiase, Jake, and Virgil. But hypothetically, if you were to go to YouTube and type in Jake Roberts versus Virgil, there's a chance you might find this exact clip. So you could go give that a shot if you'd like. But what's going on here is Ted is in the back. He's in the locker room with a blanket over him. He's got like an ice pack on his shoulder. He's got a humidifier and he's coughing, wheezing, and hacking up a lung. And he's telling Tony Schiavone that if he had it his way, he'd be going out there to wrestle Jake. But unfortunately, his doctors advised him against it. So Ted has sent his man, Virgil, out there to take care of his light work for him. So Virgil's going to go take on Jake. Tony Schiavone is empathetic. DiBiase's hacking up a lung. And we're going to flash forward to the match. All right, so Jake has got Virgil grounded. And he's signaling to the crowd. He's getting ready for the DDT. He's got him hooked. Oh, man. Jake milking the crowd for all they're worth. You can literally see the crowd start to get up. And there's the DDT. Jake hits him with the cover. Virgil's done, of course. And the crowd is losing their damn minds. There's a cool-looking shot of the bag with Jake in the background. Jake's getting up, eyeing the bag. We know what he wants to do to Virgil. Probably stuff it down his pants. Yep. Teasing the crowd with it a little bit. Jake is so good at milking the audience. Jake has changed his mind. He's saying, wait a minute. Now he's reaching down Virgil's pants. He's not pulling out his gimmick. He's pulling out some money. An iconic moment here 35 years ago. Jake is walking around the ring, handing out $100 bills, real $100 bills to shocked fans. Oh, these kids are pumped up. Jake's giving out the money. He's making sure the camera gets a good look at it too. Back in the ring. There's a happy fan. She's holding a fresh Benjamin. And now Jake, he's got one more in his hand. He puts it down his tights. Why not, Jake? Go ahead. Take it home with you. All right, now he's getting the Snake. All right, he's taking his time. I'm starting to see an angle come together here. He's bringing the bag over. And here's DiBiase jumping him from behind. Beating the dog shit out of him. And he's got him hooked in the $1 Million Dream. Jake struggling against it. Doing his best to get out. Reaching for the ropes. Ted's got it locked in though. And Jake is going down. Ted, I'm starting to think maybe you weren't actually sick.
What was the first clue?
Man, just a fun story.
I remember that, but I can't remember what we did after. Just following that. But anyway, did Jake stay down?
Oh yeah. So you would get Jake down after that, and you'd actually stuff a $100 bill into his mouth. Just kind of setting up the future of the rivalry. But that's going to go off the rails, which we'll discuss here in a little bit. Yeah. But do you remember shooting like the faking sick angle by any chance? 35 years ago.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I was looking forward to working with Jake because it was so easy. Easy.
And that makes me wonder, you had worked with Jake previously during your time in Mid-South, and knowing what you knew about
really. I mean, I didn't work with him much there. I mean, I can't remember. I mean, because when I first met him, when he first started, I was wrestling. He was a referee.
Yes.
And I started as a referee but under the Funks back in Texas.
A few years prior to Jake.
Yeah. So, and was he? I don't know. Did we have any matches in Mid-South?
You did a handful, and actually, so you and Jake would have been heels at around the same time. But then, near the end of 1985, Jake and the DDT had turned Jake babyface. It was getting so over with the crowd. So you and Jake actually worked at a stadium show. I can't remember where it was, but you were outdoors and had a match against him. And yeah, it's, even then you guys just showed some great chemistry. So I'm sure that entering this program, now you're on the biggest stage in wrestling and you guys are even more seasoned at this point. Had to feel like, all right, good. We're really going to make some matches.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always enjoyed working with Jake. It was easy. Yeah. It was like, sometimes you're in there with somebody that knows, his ass from a hole in the ground.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while, but no, Jake was easy to work with.
We spoke before about Virgil having the snake put on him a lot and body pressing it all the way out of the ring as kind of a fun little rib from Jake to Virgil. Entering this rivalry, though, you had to know that eventually you'd get the snake treatment. How did you feel about the prospect of having a big python put on you?
It didn't bother me. I mean, it's like I'm not a snake lover either. I always said the only good snake's a dead one because they're just slimy and but I mean, for the purpose of the show and everything, I wasn't worried that this snake was going to drop on me and try to wrap itself around me and squeeze me to death or anything. I mean, when he was carrying that snake into the ring, the snake was pretty docile.
Jake would say on a few occasions that, like, because there was more than one Damien. They'd probably switch out the snake, whatever.
Remember the same snake,
right? And so he would say, like, every once in a while you get an aggressive snake, and sometimes the snake would bite him. Sometimes it would wrap itself around like his neck, and it was like on 2 occasions I think Jake actually passed out and had to be helped because the snake was wrapped around him. So it's like there is some danger in messing around with a live snake.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you were never going to have to worry about that happening to me.
I don't imagine you'd let it get around your neck.
Everybody's got a price.
Now, did Jake ever rib you by stuffing the snake down your trunks or doing anything of that sort?
No.
Oh, he took it easy on you.
No, I don't think Jake would have done that because the payback would have been hell.
He must have known it. There's a great story about him putting the snake underneath a toilet stall while Arn Anderson was in there using the restroom. And apparently Arn just climbed out of the toilet stall, like over the top to get away from the snake.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
I didn't hear that one.
What a character. Okay, guys, let's hit the pause button on the show real quick to talk about our fantastic sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about the guys that we all know and love. We're talking about Blue Chew. Ever since we started talking about Blue Chew here on Everybody's Got a Pod, the question keeps coming up from people, does Blue Chew work? Well, look, if you're asking that question, we want you to know that Blue Chew is putting their money where their mouth is by giving you a month for free. Guys, Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. The process is simple. All you've got to do is sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped directly to your door. And if you want to know the best part, here it is. It's all done online. So what that means is you can forget about all the visits to the doctor's office. You can forget about having to have those awkward conversations, or how about the worst part, waiting in line at the pharmacy. Skip all of it with a little help from Blue Chew. You can take them anytime, day or night, so that you can plan ahead or be ready when an opportunity arises. And what do you stand to lose? You can try it for free for a month, and we think that you're going to love it and your partner's going to love it. You could be missing out on the best sex of your life without even knowing it just because you haven't given this a shot. It's a free service. Why not just try it? And if you don't like it, okay, forget it. You don't have to try it ever again. We always say that first impressions are important, but how about lasting impressions? Build up your confidence with Blue Chew, and they're giving you confidence where it counts the very most. Guys, Blue Chew wants men rock hard. That's what they tell me. That's their mission. They will not stop until every man is bricked up like a brick house, till every tent is pitched, till every rod is raised. Discover your options right now at BlueChew.com. And guys, we've got a special deal for you, our listeners. Again, you can try Blue Chew free. All you've got to do is use our promo code EGAP at checkout and then just pay $5 shipping. That's it. Just go to BlueChew.com, use our promo code EGAP to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring Everybody's Got a Pod. Ted, I'm not sure if you know about this, but you'd have a match with Jake in Madison Square Garden in April of 1989. So right around this period, which DDP is going to reference as his favorite match of all time and something that really influenced him from a psychology standpoint. So really cool that you and Jake were able to have such incredible chemistry that you're influencing another future Hall of Famer who's trying to kind of make his way up in wrestling.
Yeah.
Really kind of speaks to what you and Jake were able to do. And like, you know, I would imagine you always say that you and Jake were kind of on the same page because you were both second generation wrestlers. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is it a lot of time with a guy like him, it's got to be not even really verbal cues. Like sometimes you're probably just giving him a look and he knows exactly what you want, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's, of course, we always talk, but it's sometimes it's just positioning. Like, for example, if somebody's getting heat on me, and so they, for example, give me a big backdrop, and I settle the backdrop, or they try to cover me, I kick out, and I get up, and I start to go, and I start staggering towards the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't stagger to the ropes. I start staggering toward the corner. Well, that's just an impromptu to say, okay, come grab me by the hair and run my head into the turnbuckle.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then when they do that, sometimes I would do that and just do it again and call something else. But sometimes after that headshot, I would just swing around and lay myself in the corner with my back in the corner. And then just let them, give me a couple of chops and I'd call a spot, turnbuckle backdrop or, turnbuckle and try to, go for the backdrop. I'm going to kick you. I'm going to go for their elbow. You move out of the way and get it again.
Love it. Especially now that I'm training in wrestling, it's so cool to hear this kind of stuff and this insight and the small nuance things because, man, there's a lot of stuff out there that you have to do. Like, you can't just play in a match. You have to call a lot of it right then and there on the spot.
Yeah. And, and I see so many guys today, they try to sit down and outline a match from bell to bell, and it just doesn't work. Because you can do something one night in front of a crowd, and you get a great response. Now you do the same thing somewhere else, in front of a different crowd, and if they don't respond the way you expect them to, because they don't always, then you have to be able to think on your feet and shift gears.
Yes.
Because it's not always going to work. So, because every crowd's different. Now, I'll be honest with you, one of the toughest crowds for me and for a lot of guys was Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was like, I would go like, what do I have to do? Slit this guy's throat to make him mad?
Well, that's not super encouraging. I'm going to be working in front of Pittsburgh crowds soon. So, well, it's reported at this time that the matches you're having with Jake involve a lot of rest holds. Meltzer is very critical of these matches and says it's disappointing to see a man of your caliber having some underwhelming matches. What Meltzer didn't know at the time was that Jake was dealing with some serious neck issues. Now, do you remember having to take it easier on Jake in the ring during this time?
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, this is the first I'm hearing of Meltzer, and you know what, Dave Meltzer, kiss my ass. You think you're the authority on wrestling, and there's so much you think that you don't know, even now.
Mm-hmm.
Old school. You go out there, you know, and you have a match, and sometimes you sit in a damn hold because you're trying to convince the crowd that you're working on that, whatever that body part is, whether you got his arm or you got his leg or you got him in a headlock, you know, and it's that timing. Old school. All this crap about, you know, that's what's wrong with wrestling today. As far as I'm concerned, is that it's moving too fast.
Yes.
And it's all about taking big bumps and, you know, and flying around the ring. That's not wrestling. You got to tell a story. I mean, it's like if you, okay, it's like, I don't know, good guy, bad guy. You know, if you watch watch a good movie, you know, when finally a bad guy does something, you know, like most of the movie is about the good trying to overcome the evil. Okay.
Yes.
And that's what every wrestling match was about, was the good trying to overcome the evil. And you don't do that by doing 25 high spots in a match, you know. Gosh, it just drives me, I'll be honest, Marcus, it drives me crazy. I can't watch it today. I can't watch it because the girls may have more believable matches than the guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, boy, you got me going now.
Well, that's okay. We're allowed to get a little upset.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's
that's
your
it.
anniversary. We're getting pumped up, man.
I'm just, you know,
to your point, Ted, people can have a compelling match doing a lot of rest holds. Again, it's you and I, before we hit record, we're talking about working body parts in wrestling and how, like, okay, Jake, you've got an injured neck. How about I work your leg?
Yeah.
And I'll stretch it and I'll put you in holds. I'll beat on it. You know, there's easy ways to get around it.
Yeah. There is. And well, I guess what I'm saying most of all is you know, the thing that I mean, and I have fans come up to me, you know, gosh, you know, like I'm going to Phoenix, Arizona this weekend and doing an autograph signing, and I guarantee you there's going to be, and it happens every time, fans will come up to me and they say, you know, and they want to get my autograph. And I said, you know, like, I really enjoyed watching you. You guys who wrestled from the mid 80s to the mid 90s were the last great era of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're talking about. You watch it now and it looks like a tumbling match. You know what I'm saying? It's like high spot, high spot, high spot. And, you know, the high spots, you know, after a while, if you don't sell it, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
You know, if you take a great big beautiful bump over the top rope and you hit the ground and you bounce up to your feet like nothing happened, well, so what?
It was pointless. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nowadays, if you watch modern wrestling, fans are not even reacting anymore when these guys do like a big dive over the top rope or something. You know, if that happened in 1989, I mean, if people are coming unglued and the match is probably over, it'll be like a double count out or something. But now it's like it happens. They're like, oh, cool. What's next? You know? So it's, weird era of professional wrestling. And I don't know what a high spot's going to be anymore.
And Marcus, I'll be honest with you. I think it's even crossed over to motion pictures.
Mm.
It's like, there's some good old movies I've watched. I mean, it's kind of like, the Alamo, the story of the Alamo. And a big portion of that story was, you know, the wives and the kids and the setup and showing you just what they were what they were going to have to face. And I mean, because, you know, it wasn't, okay, now bang, 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 you know, here comes all the, you know, and the whole story wasn't about the fight.
Right.
I mean, the whole story was not about the fight. It was the build up to the fight.
Yes.
You know, and because the buildup, sometimes that's what makes the fight. That's, you know, I don't know how to, you know.
Well, look, if you look back at some of the greatest movies of all time, really any of the greatest movies of all time, let's say Shawshank Redemption is a good example. If in the first 20 minutes this guy breaks out of prison, where do you go from there? We needed the build up to him breaking out of prison. It took him years, and he had to go through all this horrible misery on the way there. And then finally, at the end, the redemption happens. He breaks out of prison. Yep. So again, it's about building the story, and you're like, I cannot wait for this guy to get out of prison. And then you make him wait.
Well, in a good wrestling match, that's what every story should be. Is I can't wait for the good guy to make the comeback.
Yep.
That's it.
That's exactly it. Well, I know that you're being careful with Jake and his neck here. And as somebody who dealt with neck issues yourself, what kind of things can you do to protect somebody in the ring and still put on a compelling match?
Oh, I mean, it's just the rule of thumb. There's no certain things. It's just, you got to respect each other and you just do things properly. I mean, it's kind of like whenever I was going to have a match where it required me to get the juice and bleed, I told whoever I was working with, it's like, I don't need a whole lot of time to get it, because some guys would tape the blade to the end of their finger. They would always have. It's funny. It's kind of like they would do this. Like they would always have tape on a finger, even if they weren't getting blood, right? Mm-hmm. And that was so people couldn't go, well, every time he gets blood, he's got that finger taped. Well, no. So he would just tape that finger all the time. I carried mine right there like a dip of snuff.
Weren't you afraid of cutting yourself carrying a blade in your mouth?
I never did.
Wow.
I never did. And I learned that from, oh gosh, I think the Funks, but I'd make that little thing. And because the tip on the razor blade is just, it's just, and the other thing that you do is you take some aspirin, because aspirin thins your blood, or you could, even, take a shot of whiskey, because it has the same effect. And then when you get 20 minutes into a match and you go boom, 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 it looks like you've got hit by a car.
Man, I'll tell you what, I would be terrified of swallowing a blade if I kept it in my mouth. I know it's tucked in your lip and, it's not going to come out unless you wanted to, but that would be all I'd be thinking about the whole time. Like, I'm going to take a punch and I'm just swallow this damn
thing.
I
mean, it's kind of like, it was like, think about guys who dip snuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But this was over on the side where, I always knew where it was. Anyway.
Man.
Secrets in the trade.
Interesting era of wrestling, to be sure. I'd be willing to bet everything in my bank account there's nobody walking around with a blade in their lip nowadays. Well, we've discussed before that if you didn't work during this era, you didn't get paid. And as such, a lot of wrestlers were self-medicating. And Jake has said that during this period, he was medicating just to be able to get out there to the ring with his bad neck. He's going to have 2 surgeries following this here coming up and take a lot of time off in '89. So I say all that to ask, was there ever a time when you noticed that Jake was under the influence, or was he able to kind of keep it between the lines?
No, he always kept it between the lines. There was never a time that he was in the ring that I was, worried about him in that way. I mean, obviously, I knew I did everything I could to protect him, because it's tit for tat. I mean, hey, the next time it might be you. You might have some injury that. But by God, you better show up and get in the ring. It's almost like, it's like I think about it every time I watch the movie about Elvis Presley. There's a scene in the movie where he collapses backstage, mm-hmm. and Colonel Parker comes up and he says, "I got one thing to say. You do whatever you got to do to get that guy ready to get on that damn stage."
Wow.
Yeah. So, that was the good old days, or not so much, good old days. I mean,
not always good.
Hard times too.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about it, these guys, you guys, there's a lot of pressure on you, and it's a highly competitive business. And so here's Jake, who's dealing with a serious neck injury, an injury that's going to require surgery, but he's still going out and he's beating you with the DDT. So he's flinging himself backwards and experiencing that jar on his neck every single night, because the show must go on. And these guys are self-medicating. It's like, gosh, no wonder so many of your peers would pass away young due to drug overdose.
Yeah.
Man, it's scary. It's a whole different business back in those days.
Yeah, and it was that, man. And I just tried, it's kind of like, and the trips, oh my gosh, the trips were so long.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in terms of, I don't know exactly what was in it. I don't know what but we called them bennies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the truck drivers would take. And basically the pill is a stimulant. It's kind of like, you take that pill, and a cup of coffee, and now you're wide-eyed for the next 12 hours. So, and they called them bennies. And I can't even remember now where we would get them.
A lot of people will know that as Adderall. It's something similar. It's a similar, or Ritalin.
Yeah.
It's something like that. It helps people focus. A lot of students, it got really popular when I was in college. A lot of students were using it.
I have taken Adderall. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, I tell you what it was. I drove, when my boys were in Florida in the training facility down there. And they moved it to Orlando, but they were still like in Tampa with Steve Kern. And I can't remember what I had to take, but I know I remember driving down there, and I think that's it. That's my boys were both there. Maybe it was the return trip, or maybe, I don't know. I can't remember now, but I know that, one of my boys said, "Dad, take this. It's an Adderall." He says, believe me, it'll keep you awake. You won't. And I did. And I was, I got home and I was still.
That's what they say is the only problem is, like, a lot of kids I knew in college would take it so that they could study before the night of a big test or something. Only problem was, it's like you'd finish studying and you'd say, okay, I'm going to catch a few Z's before class. And you couldn't. You're just up all night and off to class.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's they say it's, that drug can be really dangerous, especially if it's used for a prolonged period of time. So I'm sure a lot of wrestlers were using it.
And I don't know, I don't know what, maybe that's what they do today, but I know it was I can't remember. Well, the other thing that was a pretty good stimulant that I did a little bit, and again, I was so, okay, my mother died when she was 56 years old due to alcoholism. So I was always afraid of that. And I'm trying to think who was that introduced me to cocaine. I just know there was a lot of it around, and it's kind of like I never abused anything. I mean, it's kind of like it was because I was always afraid. I said, my mindset was, I don't want to do this. I'm going to do this all the time because I don't want to get hooked on it. And I don't, and I never did. But I can remember one night, JYD, God bless him, God rest his soul. He got to where he was doing it pretty heavy.
Yes.
I even told him, there was a time when, I was trying to help him out because he had gotten so into the coke. And I just, I remember one night when he had left the show before we did, or I did, and I was driving alone. He had a car full of guys, and I just came up behind him and flashed my lights. He knew it was me, and he pulled over on the side of the road. He got out. He was laughing. He says, What do you need, Dad? I said, I need a little pick-me-up to get me to Shreveport.
And he hooked you up.
He hooked me up.
Man.
And, I was always leery of, getting addicted or what have you, or just getting stupid on it.
Well, good thing. A lot of guys, including JYD, they had to learn that lesson the hard way. That sometimes it's okay if you need a little pick me up, then do what you got to do. But, the guys who were doing it every single day, nope, can't be good.
Can't do it.
So Jake will have to leave to get this neck surgery, but you're going to get a very interesting opportunity in replacement with a returning star. We have this from the 522 Observer. Topping things off this weekend was the surprising return of Rody Piper as an active wrestler to the World Wrestling Federation over this past weekend. Piper returned unannounced to the public this past Friday night in Los Angeles and will be working through this Sunday, May 21st, on all the cards originally booked for Ted DiBiase versus Jake Roberts. Roberts, who made a decent amount of press in Florida for an out-of-the-ring altercation, legitimately re-injured his neck over the past week. Piper was contacted about coming in as a last-minute replacement for Roberts since shows in both Los Angeles and San Francisco were already sold out well in advance for the Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage main event. And Piper agreed to return for 10 days. As expected, Piper's return popped the crowds in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Sacramento like crazy, with his match with DiBiase actually getting significantly more heat in each city than the Hogan Savage main event, which packed the buildings. So, Ted, I know you loved working with Jake, but the reactions you were getting with Piper here must have been electric for this big return. Am I right?
Yeah, and I would say because it was because they hadn't seen Roddy for a while, and I think everybody was really excited to see him because man, he was right there from the beginning with Vince's. He was one of Vince's guys at the beginning when they first started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he had just, for reference, he had just gone off to Hollywood and made They Live and a couple of other motion pictures.
Yeah.
So his star was really on the rise. So getting him to come back and for you to be positioned with him as he comes back, pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, and again, good deal for him, a good deal for me. And I hadn't, and that was the other thing is, I knew Roddy but after having worked with him, oh my gosh, and I loved it. He was good.
Would you say that Piper was a better in-ring worker or Jake? As far as you and your chemistry, did you have better chemistry with Piper or Jake?
I couldn't tell much difference. But basically we, Jake and I come from the same. I don't know that. It'd be a toss up. Piper's a little bit of a different guy. I don't know. That's a tough question because I guess everybody had their own style, but the old school was still the old school, and no matter where you were in the country, that's the way they did it.
Gotcha. All right, last question. We're going to wrap this one up. What was your relationship like with Rody Piper outside the ring? Were the two of you close enough that you'd be hanging out together?
Oh, yeah. He was a good guy, Yeah, there's, I don't know if we made any, road trips in a car or thing, but, back at the hotel or back at the hotel in the bar having a beer, something like that. Yeah. Good guy.
So Ted, a lot of time has passed, so I feel like you can tell us this story if there is one to tell when it comes to this. Rumor has it that Rody Piper was a big fan of cocaine, the booger sugar, and you had said that you would try it every once in a while. Did you ever do cocaine with Rody Piper?
I probably did. I probably did, because but again, there's a difference between. It's kind of like if I wanted to. It's kind of like I need a hit. I don't have a bag That's got, or a lot of guys would carry it in, like, the prescription bottles.
Yeah.
I never had a prescription bottle full of cocaine, but if I needed a little, I'd go to Roddy or somebody like that and say, hey, can I get a hit? They always would. So.
Hey, you probably saved a lot of money that way too, Ted. So that's, so that's a big win. So it's announced in May that Dusty Rhodes is making the jump to the WWF, and we'll cover that in a minute. But first, in the 6'5" Observer, it's also reported that Barry Windham is going to be making the jump to the WWF. Ted, what do you think of Barry Windham, and did you see big things for a talent like him in the WWF here on the biggest stage in wrestling?
I thought Barry was, a good worker. Again, he's another kid who was raised in the wrestling business. His dad was Blackjack Mulligan.
Yeah.
And Blackjack was, you talk about, he was, he was a pretty good worker too, but he was as, when he had to be, he could be as real as you wanted him to be.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys you want with you if you could only walk down a dark alley with one friend. But Barry, I wasn't around Barry a lot. What I saw of him, I admired. I thought he was a good worker, and I think he and my partner were tagged up for a while.
Yes, during Barry's first run.
Yeah, him and Mike Rotunda were tag team partners for a while. And they were gonna, and of course, I thought the world of Mike, thought the world of my partner.
And, I'm glad you brought that up because it's kind of going to lead into my next point about Barry. So he had already been with the WWF prior in the US Express with Mike Rotunda, and now he's coming in with the Widowmaker gimmick, and they are not acknowledging him as Barry Windham. And I think Vince even calls him an upstart whenever he comes into wrestling. For frame of reference, Barry's been wrestling for years and years at this point. So they don't acknowledge his past at all, which is kind of a weird thing, but they bring him in as the Widowmaker. Ted, what do you think about this when it comes to like kind of repackaging somebody and pretending like, oh, this guy's brand new to wrestling, even though he's got a great lineage? He was part of the Four Horsemen.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it's kind of like I started wrestling in 1975. And of course, and just I wrestled as Ted DiBiase, my real name. I wasn't a character or anything like that. And, but then, when I went up to the WWE, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, Vince was creating these characters. And of course, my character was a villain, almost like the Ebenezer Scrooge of wrestling. And my attitude toward was that is okay. This is where we're going. That's okay. But I still went by my real name, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. Vince might have, if he thought about it, he might have dropped Ted DiBiase and just $1 Million Man because merchandise and all that stuff. I mean, he can't,
he can't own your name.
He owns the $1 Million Man, but he can't own my name.
Right.
So.
Yeah, things worked out really fortunately for you, and that does make me wonder, Ted, if you had come in the door and he was calling you an upstart and stuff like that, and acting like you were just this guy who's brand new to wrestling, is that like, are you like, okay, well, I'm playing a role here, or would you have been like, hey man, I've got a pretty well established lineage here in wrestling?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that I would have spoken up about it.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that was just maybe. I guess Barry was going to do whatever he had to do to get the job.
Probably so.
And you bringing this up, it's like, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It's like, it's some of the little nuances that you pick up on whenever I'm doing like the research for this. And Meltzer mentioned it in the Observer back in '89. Like Vince called Barry Windham an upstart. He was in the Four Horsemen. Like fans knew and loved him. Like it's more cool to me to have Barry Windham come in and say like
Four Horsemen weren't part of Vince's show.
Right, but they are a big part
exactly.
of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think anybody ever. I had been to New York once before. Asked Ted DiBiase when Vince McMahon Sr. was still alive.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I wasn't brand new to the fans in that area.
Yeah.
So maybe that had, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. I don't know.
Yeah, just a really strange thing. And, he would do it later with Ricky Steamboat whenever Ricky would come back as the Dragon, where he wouldn't call him Ricky Steamboat at all.
Yeah.
So just, I don't know, kind of a strange, I guess, this was the era when I think Vince was starting to think more and more about owning the rights to everything that went on his TV.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So guys like you and Jake and Jim Duggan came in probably at just the right time for your careers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last thing about Barry before we move on, he is this guy. He's got this great look. He's big. He can work pretty good on the mic. Like, he's got pretty much everything that you'd want in a wrestler, but he had a lot of difficulty getting over in the WWF, where the Widowmaker didn't work out, of course, and before he was with the US Express. But on paper, you look at this guy, I'm like, well, that guy's a star. What do you think Barry was lacking that held him down?
Marcus, I couldn't really tell you because I never watched him enough. I think I may have seen him. Like Mike may have showed me like a tape or something of them as a tag team. I never saw them at all when they were a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. That's just I don't have any idea. I mean, it's kind of like. Mechanically, he was good. I don't know. It's kind of like he was good. There was no doubt that he was good. My partner Mike was good. The thing about is kind of like charisma. If you don't have it, if you don't have charisma, then you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
But then there's different levels of charisma. So I don't know.
Yeah, Ted, I think maybe the argument could be made that really all that was missing for Barry Windham was the right opportunities, because you take a look at that guy, and again, it seems like he's got all of it, including the lineage in wrestling. So, yeah, I don't know, kind of weird that he would go to the biggest stage in wrestling and not have the kind of success he would enjoy elsewhere.
Yeah. And I can't answer that question for you. I mean, it's like I thought he was good. It's kind of like I thought he was a good worker, but I didn't. I never saw enough of him to say, oh my gosh, they need to, they need to make him the champion or anything like that. I just, my knowledge of that, you probably get you'd get a better. A read on Barry from my partner, Mike Rotunda.
Yes.
So, anyway.
Well, Ted, you're going to get a sudden change in dance partner again here at the start of the summer in '89. As a reminder, you entered a rivalry with Jake Roberts after WrestleMania 5, but he's out for months due to neck surgery. So Vince is going to bring back Rody Piper, which we discussed, and you're going to work with him for a while. But it is somewhat short-lived. Here's the report from the Observer. Well, Rody Piper's 10-day tour of the WWF wound up being a 3-day tour. I don't know any details of what wound up happening, except that Piper's last match that I know of with Titan was last Sunday night in Sacramento, and that Jimmy Snuka replaced Rody Piper, who replaced Jake Roberts, at all the shows this week against Ted DiBiase, with Ted once again playing Jobber for the Stars. So, Ted, I know that comment there at the end probably comes off as abrasive.
Is that what he said?
That's what Meltzer said. But let me give some context before you respond to it, okay? So I wanted to include that because of the way that he framed it there. I don't think he was saying that to be disrespectful to you. I think, as I've mentioned before here, he considers you one of the best workers in the world at this time. But things have changed for you a bit in the WWF, and you're doing a lot of jobs to guys that Vince seems to favor as baby faces. So I think that that's the context of it, but I will allow you to respond to that notion.
Well, yeah, well, okay, and if you look at it, I guess from maybe Vince's point of view, what better way to get a new babyface over than to put him with one of your top heels to get him to win?
Yes.
And I really think that's more of what that was. And I don't think it's kind of like when I came in, the push I got was one of the biggest pushes they ever did. I mean, the $1 Million Man stuff, it went on and it went on and it went on, but then, you can't stay on the top river, especially if you're a heel.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a babyface, if you're Hulk Hogan or whoever that guy is, and even that, it's like you got to change things up. And I think that more than anything, it was like, I wasn't at the bottom of the card. When I was wrestling all these other guys, it's not the main event, but it's not the opening or second or third match either.
Right.
It's a significant match. So I think more than anything, that was, and that's, hey, I was a heel. And the other thing about that is, as long as I have the ability to make the people hate me, I don't care if I'm on the first or second match, as long as I can be that heel and get those people where I want them, I'm happy. But of course, if I'd have been put down on them, I was never the curtain jerker.
No.
The first match, second match, I was never put in a position like that, and I wouldn't. That's when I would have gone to Vince and go, "What are you doing?"
You were always figured in, and
that's it.
To me, more than anything, it feels like you're almost you're in a weird kind of holding pattern right now as you wait for Jake Roberts to get healthy again after his surgery, because everybody sees money in that angle. I think at this point, you guys have already done that angle where he's stuffing, or he steals the money from Virgil, and then you attack him and you stuff the money in his mouth. You guys have done that part already. And then Jake gets hurt, and now it's like, oh shit, now what do we do?
Yeah.
So they're trying out some other stuff with you. So you weren't too concerned. You knew that the pendulum was eventually going to swing back the other way just because of your skills as a heel.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on to Dusty Rhodes, and you're going to play a big role in this. But first, here's what Meltzer had to say about him coming in. The shockwaves have been pretty strong this past week when the word got out of the newest acquisition of Titan Sports, none other than Dusty Rhodes. There is no word on what role Rhodes will play with Titan upon his planned arrival, tentatively scheduled for August, but the announcement within Titan got over like a lead balloon among several of the Titan wrestlers. So that August guess is wrong. He's actually going to come in here really fast. But Ted, do you remember any of the guys like Arn Anderson or Tully Blanchard or other former JCP guys having an issue with Dusty coming to the WWF?
Well, and again, remember this: Dusty had also been a booker.
Yes.
In Charlotte. And Charlotte was, I think, wasn't Charlotte maybe Florida too?
Yeah, so he had office roles in Charlotte and Florida.
And so being a booker, you can make enemies pretty quick if you don't get booked the way if he doesn't book you the way you think you should be booked. Anyway, I never had a problem with Dusty. I mean, the first time I saw Dusty, I was still playing football, West Texas State. He and Dick Murdoch had been a tag team, and they had been a tag team like I think they went over to Australia or something, whatever. But I think they called them the Outlaws. And oh my gosh, were they good together?
What a pair!
The first time I met Dusty was in Dick's house in Amarillo, Texas, and then when and I don't know what Vince's deal was, but they put Dusty in this ridiculous looking outfit. I mean, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
And what did they call him?
Well, so they kept his American Dream moniker.
Yeah.
Right. But now it's like the American Dream, it's they've got him doing vignettes, delivering pizza and unclogging a toilet and all that stuff to introduce his character as this common man who's willing to do any job.
Yeah.
And then he comes in wearing polka dots and, on the surface kind of seems like they buried him.
But I'm going to tell you what, and it's to Dusty's credit. Dusty said, okay, I'm going to take this ball and run with it. And he did.
Yes.
He got over. I mean, when you can work, you know how to get over. And so, yeah, and I remember, he and I had some good matches.
Yeah, I don't think you can hold down a talent like Dusty Rhodes, no matter what you give
No.
him. But I will say, it's like this is a guy that you've seen before. You've actually worked with him prior in your career. I want to say you'd like stop by Mid-South and work with you guys. And I know if there's a match out there, so a guy that you know and have all this respect for, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
However, now you're seeing these vignettes of this guy that I heard Jake say once that the only time he ever got nervous in the ring was the first time he stepped in the ring with Dusty Rhodes. Like, so to say that this guy is a big star and a big deal, even among the boys, he's like a Harley Race. It's like all the boys love and respect him. And he's coming in and he's unclogging a toilet on national television during one of his vignettes.
Yeah.
I mean, Ted, when you see that, is it like, what are they doing? Or did you think it was good stuff?
Well, I don't recall seeing any of the vignettes because it's kind of like, it's kind of like we would do all the TVs, and it's very rare that I went back and just let me go watch myself.
Oh yeah, okay. So you never saw them. So
I mean, I didn't see that vignette, no, but I knew that they had done those things with him.
Hearing about it now and thinking back on it now, do you feel like it's disrespectful to a talent like Dusty to put him in that position, or like, hey, look, it's showbiz?
You know what? I don't know if Vince did that, to try and humiliate him, but Vince also knows that he got over. And the other thing you got to remember about Vince was never a wrestler. Vince's gift was marketing. And now he's marketing all of these characters, and he's marketing them to a younger audience. He's trying to sell video games, action figures, and all that merchandise.
And, I think that a lot of fans view this whole, common man thing with him unclogging toilets and stuff as like a very indefensible thing. And I've never defended it before, but I will go to bat for Vince McMahon a little bit here. To your point, he was more of a marketer than he was a wrestling guy. So he's not looking at Dusty Rhodes saying like, boy, what a great legacy this man has in wrestling. He's looking at him saying, okay, how can I entertain people with this guy to introduce him to the audience? So that's what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know, it's kind of like it may have been Vince's way, I don't know, of testing Dusty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as these vignettes are airing, you're the one to work with Dusty on house shows beginning on May 29th. So Meltzer was a little bit off guessing that he was going to debut in August, because he's debuting right away here. It's May 29th. And presumably you're in this position to get Dusty ready for his debut on TV. But here's what's interesting. You mentioned that maybe Vince was testing Dusty. At a Superstars taping on June 6th, you'll defeat Dusty in a dark match, which was eventually released years and years later on a WWE unreleased DVD. What's significant about this is that throughout the entire run of you guys doing these house shows, he's beating you at all of them. But then it's kind of like his first time at TV, so to speak, and he does the job for you. And the rumor surrounding that match in particular was that WWF officials wanted you to go over against Dusty to see if he was willing to do business. And so it's an interesting rumor. I'm not sure if you heard any of the scuttlebutt, but what do you think?
Yeah, it very well could have been a test. Like it's like they're putting me over to see how Dusty's going to react.
To your knowledge, did Dusty have a reputation for not wanting to do the job for people?
Oh no! But Dusty was always, he was all business, you know, and it's kind of like, yeah, he was, you know, I mean, he came from the old school for sure. Like I said, he and Dick Murdoch were one of the, I mean, you talk about tag team. Oh my gosh. I think they called them the Outlaws. And you might look that up.
They're a hell of a pairing, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I know without even having to see it in research, because it didn't exist in research, I know definitively that guys like Tully and Arn had issues with Dusty. Tully at one point said that Dusty should book Dusty against Dusty so Dusty could go over against Dusty, because like Dusty was booking himself in JCP and he was winning a lot. And so like I think that guys like Arn and Tully were starting to get really frustrated with that scene, but now here he is. So it kind of makes sense that maybe Titan would say,
and you know, I could see that, but you know, like that was. I remember because Dusty tried real hard to get me to Charlotte, and I never went to Charlotte.
Right.
And it wasn't, it wasn't because I didn't want to go to Charlotte. I just, I was doing other things, and and I guess obviously Arn and Tully. I mean, Tully grew up in the business just like I did, and was could see things for what they were and get frustrated with it. Yeah, I can see that.
And look, it's wrestling too. It's a very competitive business. So like, as if somebody else is winning all the time, guys who are lower on the card are not getting the push that they think they deserve. Say like, why is that guy winning all the time? So it's just the nature of wrestling. Yeah.
In the old days, if you didn't like the way you were getting booked, all you had to do was give the promoter a 2-week notice, and 2 weeks you were gone, and you go to another territory where nobody knows you. And, and of course that by this time, all of that's going by the wayside because, now eventually, wrestling is going, WWE wrestling is going to be not only nationwide, but worldwide.
And Ted, you're going to be working with Dusty here on the house show loop for 2 straight months. The only matches that you have are against Dusty Rhodes for 2 months here with the WWF. And at this time, it makes me wonder, Dusty, he's getting a little bit older at this time. Rumor has it that he's been telling everybody during this period that this is his final year as an active wrestler, which of course wouldn't end up being true. But did he feel like the Dusty Rhodes of old, or did you feel like maybe he'd lost a little step here or there?
Nah, he was good as he always was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's excellent because he was great, to be sure. And again, it's when your ring work starts to lack, you can make up for it with some great charisma, and he had that in spades.
Absolutely.
Well, here's what's interesting, Ted. After 2 months of you working with Dusty, he makes his debut, but it's not with you. He'll immediately begin a program with the Big Boss Man instead. So again, it's like this is still fresh to the audience. It's his TV debut. Like the at-home audience, by and large, has not seen Dusty work. So in theory, they could have said, okay, Dusty and Ted, they've been working together. They've developed chemistry. Why not put them together? I mean, would you say that you were disappointed not to get that spot with Dusty headed into SummerSlam?
I don't think I had any problem with any of it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, I had a different attitude than a lot of guys. I mean, it's kind of like, the the boss is going to do with you what he wants to do. And and here's the other thing I knew. It's kind of like, if I have a legitimate complaint, okay. But even if I don't have a legitimate complaint, then if I complain to Vince and he says, no, there's the door, go somewhere else.
That's the risk you run.
And there wasn't anywhere else to go.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're in an independent contractor, you're kind of at the whim or the will of the promoter. So it is what it is. Also, it's, I guess, when I'm reading this, the fan in me is like, why wouldn't they put Ted with Dusty at SummerSlam? It's the second biggest show of the year. These two have chemistry. Like, why not put those two together? But when you start to think about it a little bit more logically, it's like that we know that we're working toward Ted and Jake and the rivalry that's eventually going to happen here at WrestleMania. So the idea of Dusty coming in, Dusty in theory would have to go over against you at SummerSlam.
And here, that's the other thing is why put Dusty with me in that pay-per-view that's going to be seen everywhere to get beat?
Right.
So
that's it. So he's not going to do the job. It's his debut. He's got to win. But then you need to look strong going into this thing with Jake. So that's like, as frustrating as it is, and it would have been cool to get that match in '89, it's like, well, it does make more sense to go the other way. So coming out of your program with Dusty, you're locking horns with Hillbilly Jim for some reason. Ted, what did you think about Hillbilly Jim as a man and as a worker?
He's a good guy. Good guy. He was good on the microphone, but very limited in the ring.
Mm-hmm. He was
guys that that Terry Funk would always tell me. He says, when you get with somebody like that, it's kind of like Junkyard Dog. Junkyard Dog was fantastic on the microphone, and the people loved him. He says, but you're going to have to put him in the middle of the ring and walk and work around him. That's what I did. And Hillbilly Jim was the same. He's limited. Here's this great big guy. What are you going to do with him? Well, you got to believe for believability's sake. The first thing you got to do is find a way to get him off his feet.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, that's.
Do you think there would have been more money in making Hillbilly Jim instead of giving him this kind of silly, goofy, fun, kid-oriented character? Do you think there would have been more money in making him like some big monster heel?
I think Vince is probably still thinking about merchandise.
Yeah,
merchandise. I mean, he's taken wrestling and made it family programming. And obviously, you got all these little kids that are out buying video games and action figures and stuff. They don't want to see their heroes get beat.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And to your point, Hillbilly Jim was like on the cartoon and stuff for the kids. So I think that's one of those characters that Vince said, like, well, let's instead of turning him, he's a huge guy, but why don't we make him a friendly giant?
Yeah.
Well, Ted, let's get to SummerSlam. It's in East Rutherford, and I've become something of a Ted DiBiase expert since starting this podcast. And before I started the notes for this show, I was kind of racking my brain. I was like, who in the world did Ted wrestle at this event? So I'll pass it to you. 35 years ago, do you have any idea who you wrestled at SummerSlam '89, the year after you and Andre took on Hogan and Savage?
I don't have a clue.
There's a good reason that you don't have a clue, and a good reason that I didn't have a clue. After spending most of the summer working with Dusty Rhodes and then randomly working against Hillbilly Jim for a while, at the second biggest show of the year, you're in there with Jimmy Snuka with no build of any kind. And as a matter of fact, you and Snuka didn't work together at all in the lead up to this. Like I said, you're working with Dusty Rhodes and then Hillbilly Jim. So it's like, it's just a cold match. Out of nowhere. So, I mean, you main evented SummerSlam the year prior. Would you say that it's frustrating to get a cold match going into this? Or again, were you just like, hey, whatever, it's just the job I'm being asked to do?
Yeah. I mean, here's the bottom line. For all of us, you can complain, you can, but here's the deal. You're in an organization now. The territories have all gone away. You could throw a fit and quit and go somewhere else. Well, there was nowhere else to go.
Right.
And the more cooperative I am with them, in my opinion, the better they're going to treat me in the long run.
Absolutely. And there was one other option, a viable option, which would have been the NWA WCW at this time. However, yeah, you could go get that Turner money, but you're also running a risk of getting bad creative. You're no longer on the biggest stage in wrestling. Their marketing machine is nowhere close to what Vince's is. So to your point, it's like, hey, look, just take the damn money and do your job and do as well as you can, and the cream will rise to the top, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
You always gotta, it's kind of like you can't be on top forever as a heel. A heel has to, he eventually he gets to the top, but he's going to get knocked off. Well, then, he doesn't have to go to the bottom of the card, but now because they're always grooming a new heel for the champion.
Now, as a heel that's already been to kind of like the pinnacle in wrestling, what do you have to do to get back to the top of the card? Do you have to change anything about yourself or your presentation?
No. I mean, enough time goes by, and then it's just kind of like then they when they made this, when I did the angle with Jake. Okay, so no, we weren't the main event, but we weren't at the bottom of the ladder either, were we?
No, a very strong angle.
A very strong angle. That's just it. It's like, your superhero, your Hulk Hogan he's there, and that's the guy you keep feeding fresh fish to, fresh heels, and they have their run with him, and they get beat, and they go back down, and they start working their way back up, and that's the deal. You don't go all the way to the bottom, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes, it does make sense.
Yeah, and back in the old territory days, if you were a heel like that, you go through all the baby faces and get to the main guy. Like in the Amarillo territory, it would be the Funks, and then once they beat you, well, then you got to go away for a while. Like go to another territory, and then come back a year later or whatever, or 2 years later, and you're fresh again.
That makes perfect sense. Yes, and I think that the other path back to the main event for a heel, now that I'm sort of thinking this through, is that Hulk Hogan is going to be replaced by some other baby face, whether it be the Ultimate Warrior or Randy Savage, and then they're going to need somebody to work against. Well, why not bring the $1 Million Man back up? So it's and good points. Now, as far as yourself and Jimmy Snuka was concerned, did you feel like you two had some decent in-ring chemistry? What did you think of Snuka?
Oh yeah. I had no problem with Jimmy.
The main event has got Hogan and Beefcake teaming up to take on Savage and Zeus. Big Tony Lister is making some huge money and not doing a whole lot of anything by and large. And now he's got the main event spot at SummerSlam. Safe to assume a lot of the boys were not especially pleased with this.
I mean, it was. I'm sure there's several guys were not too crazy about it. I don't even think Hogan was so crazy about it, because I mean, it's kind of like, I just think I think Vince thought he could make anybody, but he got out of Lister what he could, but that wasn't much. I mean, there wasn't much to work with.
No, I know that he got put with like Dusty Wolf, an enhancement talent with the WWF, to kind of, get him to the buildings and probably teach him some stuff along the way and all that. But it's like, how do you take this guy who's an actor who's never stepped foot in a wrestling ring and say like, okay, we're going to teach you how to work a match in whatever, like a month? I know that it was to promote their movie No Holds Barred, and that was really what this was about. So like to that point, probably a good idea and good marketing. However, it's if I'm a veteran wrestler and I'm working,
well, you just told me why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why did they have the match? To promote the movie.
Exactly. But if I'm a 15-year veteran and I'm working, second, and I see that this actor's getting in there and working the main event and getting all that money, I don't know, I'd probably be a little bit pissed.
Brother,
That's wrestling, right?
That's just wrestling. I mean, there's just going to be times when, hey, I've been all the way to the top, and I was there a long time, and I went back down, and I mean, I didn't go down to the bottom, but I was always, let's put it this way, I was always in the group that were doing interviews.
Yes.
Okay, so if I was on a major show, I had done an interview for that match. I was never like the curtain jerker, and you understand that. That's wrestling. It's like you keep feeding the guy at the top, your hero.
For you, when it comes to Tony Lister, it's kind of a unique situation because you came in the door for the WWF getting limousines and 5-star hotels and a stipend, etc. Would you say that you were happy for this guy? Who wouldn't take advantage of this deal? Or was it different circumstances because you're an experienced wrestler and he's just an actor?
Well, I mean, it's like being the right guy, the right thing they're looking for at the right time. They were going to do this movie, and this guy fit the bill. So okay, but it's a one-off. What else did he do after that was over? You never heard about him again.
Yeah, he'd wind up at like Survivor Series that year on your team. As a matter of fact, we'll cover it later on this year. But that was about it. A very short-lived run. There were new arrivals coming into the company at this time. First is Fred Ottman, who's arriving under the name of Tugboat Thomas, which will soon be shortened to Tugboat. And he had made a name for himself in Florida as Big Steel Man, and now he's here. And Ted, they got this big guy dressed up as a sailor. What did you think of this gimmick for Big Fred Ottman?
Hey, you know what? He's a good guy. He's a good guy. I didn't obviously, and I didn't meet him until until the WWF brought him in. And so, yeah, good guy. Got no issues with him.
You take a look at Fred, and I like first thing that pops into my head when I look at him is I'm like, boy, what would Bill Watts have done in Mid-South with a guy the size of Fred Ottman, this massive human being, just like jumps right off the page. He's like a comic book character. Yeah. And then it's like he comes to the WWF. It's just kind of a sign of the times where Vince is like, yeah, I don't know, put him in a sailor's outfit and have him say toot toot when he's in the ring. He's a tugboat. Just such a weird gimmick. Ted, if they wanted you to be a sailor coming in the door, do you think you would have signed the contract?
I don't think so. No. I am not Popeye.
I imagine you would have tried your chances down there with the Crockett's.
Didn't they try to do? I can't remember who did it, but I don't know. Somebody that looked a lot like Popeye. I don't know.
Oh man, there was a Popeye gimmick out there at one point.
Well, no, I don't think so.
Well, now
you couldn't have called him Popeye anyway.
Well, now you've got me curious. I got to look this up. In wrestling though, I wonder what the guy would take instead of spinach as a wrestler. Probably like probably some somas. that would get him going.
I have no idea.
Another name coming in during this period is Earthquake. And Big John Tenta, what an impressive looking guy himself. And I mean, of course, it's ironic. These two big monstrous guys are coming in at about the same time, and pretty soon they're going to be known as the Natural Disasters.
Right.
He's a former sumo wrestler, legit badass, and apparently a pretty nice human being. Ted, what can you tell us about Big John Tenta?
Big John Tenta was just what you just said, a really nice guy, and thank God, because that size, you wouldn't want him to be like some freak who, wants to beat everybody up. No, he was a really good guy and very easy to work with. And it's true, he was, here's a guy who legitimately had been a sumo wrestler in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that sumo wrestling, it ain't no joke, buddy. That's some hard stuff.
It
So,
takes a hell of a man to train in sumo. Like their training is apparently really grueling, and boy, what a physical sport.
absolutely. So, but good guy.
One of the things that Jake has always told me about Earthquake was that he was surprised, how young he was during this period. I mean, when he's coming in the company, he's in his 20s. He looks like he's in his 40s, but he's only in his 20s. And also the lack of experience that he had at this time. He'd only been wrestling for a handful of years at this point, and boom, he's on the biggest stage in wrestling. Ted, everybody always says that you really couldn't see that he was that new. He was just kind of a natural wrestler. Did you get that impression when you were in the ring with him?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, and again, I learned a lot of stuff from you. It was like all these years later, I had no idea that he was that young, that he had, because his work said otherwise,
Yeah, just a young guy, still really green in the business, but just one of those guys that was a good enough athlete and smart enough that he kind of just got it and fit right.
Well, that's it. And the other thing too is guys like that, and there's a lot of guys like that they're big and but they're not, it's kind of like they think they've arrived and they don't want to hear it from anybody. But the other thing that was good about him, he was very coachable.
Ah.
He's one of those guys who would get in the ring, and if he was in the ring with somebody like me or Jake or any one of the other guys that, would be the leader in the match, he listened.
Well, one thing that sticks out to me in what you just said there is that this, as a reminder, is an era of professional wrestling where it's like maybe some of the veteran guys are not always quite approachable, where it's like a lot of the guys were in the back playing cards. And, if you try to come up to a guy, if you were like a jobber coming on a WWF card and you came up and said, "Oh, hey, Mr. DiBiase, I'm so-and-so. What do you want to do tonight?" The answer would usually be what? See you in the ring, right?
Yeah.
Now, with all that being said, are you guys backstage with a guy like John Tenta saying, "Hey, I think you can improve on this," or "Why don't you try that?" Or is that a moment that would happen?
I don't know. I mean, it could, but I mean, if you're getting in the ring with a guy that's that big, and that he's been a sumo wrestler. I mean, because they ain't nothing. Sumo wrestling is not a work. Sumo's the real deal, buddy.
Yeah.
And I would probably have a little more respect for that guy than I would somebody else. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, I've had experience with young green guys, and they've always, I never had a problem with any of them. They were always very respectful. And hey, Mr. DiBiase, I mean, they know, I'm here to do a job for you. I mean, what do you want to do? And that was great. I just never, I just never had anybody like bow up on me or whatever, and even, and Big John, man, I mean, here's a guy who, didn't have to be nice, but thank God he was.
Yeah, like what could you do about it if that guy decided
yeah, really.
he wanted to take advantage of you in the ring? You couldn't do anything.
No, he was a good guy.
Last thing on this whole enhancement guys coming up to you bit, like Ted, were you the type who would just say see you in the ring, or were you like, hey, what do you do, and how, like trying to find ways to help the guy out? No,
I would always take time with guys, and say, okay, because I remember when I was green, when and you're talking about me, somebody who was raised in the business. I've been around the wrestling business my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would take time with those guys, because I remember when I first started, I wanted to make an impression, and you want to try to get along, and a lot of, but then again, some of the old timers, it's like, they're playing cards in the dressing room, and a lot of them would. They say, like, hey, I'll see you in the ring, kid. That was it.
Yeah.
But then when they got in the ring, obviously they were led. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's just a matter of listening to the veteran and keeping your mouth shut, and you'll
Yeah.
have an okay match if you do
Yeah.
that.
That's right.
Also at this time, the Rougeos and the Brainbusters, Arn and Tully, are all going to give their notice during this period. And according to the Observer at the time, Vince may have been feeling a little bit of pressure as a result of these departures. We have this report. Vince McMahon had personal meetings this past week with both Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage to make sure the key stars aren't considering making a move. Actually, neither of those names had ever been mentioned by anyone, although either would be a key acquisition. I'd figure Hogan would be impossible to get. Savage would be very hard because he's got long-term plans here, but money talks and never say never. So, Ted, I found that excerpt pretty interesting. It's also rumored at this time that Bret Hart has been negotiating with the NWA. And the wrestling world is taking on some big changes during this time, and that's why I think you're starting to see this. Vince is still pretty unmatched when it came to ratings, but now he has to contend with the deep pockets of Ted Turner instead of the more limited funds of the Crockett's from before. So I know that you were happy with your spot in the WWF by and large. You were featured, you were the top heel in the company. But was there ever a thought in your mind that grass and money might be a little greener if you make the jump to NWA after your contract is up?
I don't know. I don't really think that I ever. The other thing that was really good about Vince, or I would say, he always, his loyalty was a big thing with him. Guys that had been loyal to him, like there's guys that I remember they had become agents, but like Tony Gurria.
Yeah.
Remember that name? Tony used to wrestle with the WWF, and Tony was one of the agents, one of the producers. One of the guys that showed up at the show to tell everybody what they were doing. And he was, and obviously, he was now being paid for that position, and so I think one thing that Vince rewarded was loyalty, but that's the other thing. Vince rewards your loyalty, but he also is a businessman. You know what I'm saying? And he understands. He understands. It's kind of like at the end of the day, it's like, what can you do for me? So, it's like, no, that's why I was willing to make the jump to WCW, because this was not just a contract per se, like I said before, the worst contracts anybody ever had with Vince, basically all it did was protect him. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't, there wasn't anything in the contract that basically said, well, this is how much you're going to make.
Yeah.
Not back then. It was just this, basically he owned you.
Reference. Go ahead.
And then, but when I went to WCW, it was a 3-year contract, and it was like, and I got paid a little bit more each year. And it was like the no cut deal. Whether I was there or was not, they were going to pay me.
And for reference, for listeners,
actually ended up what happened.
They sent you home, paid you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like the kicker was, this all happened about the time that I was getting right with God, mm-hmm. And I just told them, I said, look, I said, guys, I am being seen and will be being seen on a lot of Christian television, and I said, to have me, on television telling everybody how much I love God and I'm living for God, and then you go and I'm this heel manager on this show, it's kind of like it takes the mystique out of it. It's like the people, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that was the whole reason that they turned me babyface and then took me over, and I became the manager of the
Steiners.
The Steiner brothers.
Got to make it make sense.
Yeah.
And, you know, for reference for our listeners, which I'm sure a lot of people know, but maybe some don't, when you would sign with the WWF at this time, your guarantee was 10 dates at $150 per date. So for those of you who can't do math, that's $1,500 guaranteed is all you got when you signed a contract with Vince McMahon back in the day. Now, Vince, of course, would make up the rest of it by putting you on the house shows and getting you paid off of that. But you were Vince's mercy. And it was so much. Yeah. So like Arn and Tully, for example, Arn Anderson tells the story of why he left the WWF. When he negotiated with Vince, Vince said, what are you getting paid by the Crockett's? Arn told him the figure, and Vince said, you'll beat it. I'll beat it here with you. And so Arn shook his hand, took him at face value. At the time that Arn and Tully give their notice to the WWF, they're the tag team champions. They're taking a look at their year to date, the amount of money that they had made, and they had made $50,000 less than they had the year prior with the Crockett's. So that's why they're like, well, he lied to us. Let's give our notice. We'll go back to the NWA. And that's what ended up happening. I say all that to say that it was, man, you're kind of under pressure when you're working for Vince. There is no guaranteed money. If you get hurt and you don't work, you don't get paid. So a stressful situation, which I know for me, if I heard that Ted Turner's down there throwing around guaranteed money and he's this billionaire who loves wrestling, I'd be like, oh boy, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's pretty much what it was. And so hindsight's 20/20, and sometimes I wonder if I had stayed with Vince all the way through, because eventually I did go back.
Mm-hmm.
If it would have been any different, but I don't know. Probably not.
You know, the selfish part of me wonders what it would be like to see Ted DiBiase jump over to NWA WCW in like 1989, 1990 during that period, because for all the faults and the fact that Vince was still kicking butt in the WWF, man, there was some cool stuff going on in WCW. Like Terry Funk was wrestling, Ric Flair, like there was all this kind of fun stuff going on. And man, seeing Ted make the jump over there could have been pretty fascinating. Yeah,
well, I guess we'll never know.
I'd say things turned out pretty well for you.
Yeah, you know what? It has.
Well, speaking of you, let's get to what was going on with you during this period. Coming off of SummerSlam, you're working a lot with Jim Duggan on the house show loop as Jake finishes his recovery from neck surgery. So just a refresher on what was going on. You'd start a program with Jake back in the spring. Jake, his neck injury from 1987 finally catches up with him. He's like, I got to go get surgery. So now they had to kind of pivot with you. And you're sort of like a man without a rivalry right now, where you're talking a lot about Jake Roberts in your promos and talking about how you put him out of business. But in the meantime, you're getting kind of random pairings as far as your opponents. So kind of a weird time in your career. I actually, as a matter of fact, at SummerSlam, you just randomly fought Jimmy Snuka. You guys hadn't wrestled prior. All of a sudden, it's just like Ted and Jimmy Snuka are wrestling on pay-per-view, and that was the end of it. So you're kind of you're finding your way without Jake, but here you go. You've got Jim Duggan, a guy you'd worked with previously. What's it like being in the ring with Jim? Do you treat him like you do JYD, put him in the middle of the ring and kind of bounce around him?
Duggan, yes and no. I mean, it's like, and again, basically what you just say is that's basically what I think I told you. Terry Funk told me. He says when you're the heel and you're the guy calling the match and everything, and you got somebody that's got a lot of talent, got a lot of charisma, but not a lot of actually ring talent. It's what you got to do. You got to put him in the middle of the ring and work around him. And for the most part, I had to do that more with JYD than I did with Jim. I used to have a lot of Jim and I. We hit it off from the get go. I mean, we'd be having matches, and Jim back then, he had that issue, with his eyes, right? And so I would have him throw me out of the ring, and I'd get up, and he'd stick his head through the the ropes, to chastise me, and I'd say, "Over here, Duggan, over here." Yeah, and he'd be shaking his finger at me. People couldn't hear what or tell what he was saying. He says, "No eye jokes, no eye jokes." So we had a lot of fun, and Jim was good. He was good. I mean, again, more natural talent than I guess JYD. Maybe not as good on the mic as JYD, but definitely he was no slouch.
Jim, as I'm getting older and watching him perform, he's become one of my favorite wrestlers. Just because he's such a character. It's like you're not gonna get a Bret Hart match out of him, but he's such a character that it doesn't really matter. It's he's entertaining, and that's really what everybody's there for, right?
Well, that's it. And you don't want everybody to be the same. The more different your character can be, the better. So. I was like my character was like the Snidely Whiplash, the money hungry guy, as a heel, and was kind of like I would go out in the ring and I would show those people that I could wrestle, that I was good, but I would always make the baby face look a little better, and then at some point that would frustrate me to the point where I would then begin to cheat, and the rest is history. No.
It was always entertaining watching you as the heel, especially because you'd come in with the bravado, and then it's like, what would happen when the going gets tough? You try to cheat or beg off. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. You become a coward. Right. That's a bully.
Yep.
And my dad told this to me a long time ago. He said, "Son," he says, "I'm not telling you to go out and start fights." He says, "But if you ever have to fight. He said, and even if you don't win, the guy who fought you won't bother you again." And I go, "Why?" He says, "Because he knows you'll fight."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way most bullies are. They bully themselves around everything, and then when somebody actually confronts them, then it's like, oh, sometimes they're on their heels already before there ever is a fight.
Yep.
But he says, but if you have to fight. He says, I'm not encouraging you to fight. And he says, avoid it if you can, but if you can't avoid it, then fight. And just know this, that whoever that bully was will never bully you again, because he knows you'll fight. And bullies look for easy prey.
And in wrestling, there's nothing more satisfying than a guy like you, this bully who's pushing people around because of your money, and then all of a sudden, finally, the tables are turning and you're begging off and on your knees. Yeah, that's great stuff.
And it's not only is it theater coming to life, but it's in real life too. That's the way bullies are, the bad guys.
Well, on the way to Survivor Series, you're trying to bully Hulk Hogan. You were challenging him at Saturday night's main event, and the world title is on the line. So you've got a hell of a spot here on NBC on the way to Survivor Series. Let's have a look at how this one turned out.
Here comes Zeus! Zeus! The human wrecking machine from behind! Hook's holster preventing the right hand from landing! Hulk Hogan hooked by a mighty Zeus! And you know he ain't going nowhere! DiBiase! Leveling! No! Zeus won't go down! Small package holster! Hooks him and gets the free! I can't believe it! He's locked down again! He has got to be the luckiest wrestler on the face of this earth, McMahon! Wait a minute! Right now, what we all have waited for! A one-on-one encounter is about to happen! Hulk, one-on-one with Zeus the human wrecking machine! We've been waiting for this for a long, long time! Hulkster and Zeus circling with an unofficial matchup! And it's just about all ready to break loose now! The powerful Zeus ready to assert himself again! No, DiBiase from behind!
break his neck. Did you hear that? Ted DiBiase telling Zeus break his neck. Zeus wrenching the neck of Hulk Hogan. The Hulkster falling right down to the canvas. Some sort of reverse chin lock there, just wrenched his neck. And how easy he did that, McMahon. It was like nothing for Zeus. Hulk Hogan barely to his feet. I can't believe what DiBiase just did to the official. And now, DiBiase applying the $1 million dream to the Hulkster. He's wearing him right down. He's down to one knee. It's going to be off to dreamland for Hogan. Never before has Hogan been put to sleep. But I think we're going to have a first here, McMahon, on Saturday night's main event. The Hulkster going off to dreamland. I wonder if he's going to have nightmares about Zeus. Zeus wrenches neck, but wait a minute. Here's Jake the Snake coming back in. Damien is loose in the ring. DiBiase heading for collar. Jake the Snake with Damien loose in the ring. Brings things up. But unfortunately for Hulk Hogan, he has suffered the consequences. The Hulkster's still down. He won the match. He won the battle. But I'm not too sure if he won the...
All right. There we have it. Ted, you're out there with Zeus. And boy, what an 8x10 that guy had. But that's about all he had. What can you tell us about working with Zeus?
Yeah, he was he had a great body.
Very diplomatically put.
He did, and he worked hard to have that great body, but he should have worked a little bit harder on learning how to work. You know,
man. Rumor has it that up to this point, Randy Savage was tasked with trying to help Zeus. And Zeus, of course, he's an actor, so he's got no wrestling knowledge. He's got no real ability to comprehend the business. But he's out here and he's on NBC with like some of the biggest stars in the industry, yourself and Hulk Hogan. So Ted, this is now all of a sudden, you know, Randy Savage is not quite so involved with Zeus, and you are kind of the main heel in this angle with Tony Lester, I don't know, Tony, trying to turn to somebody for advice. I'm sure. I have to imagine that you were tasked with trying to help him out under these circumstances.
Probably. I mean, you know, anybody would be. You know, you'd have obviously, again, gonna put somebody who needs help gets put with somebody that can help them. So, and even though you know, it wasn't me wrestling him, you know, as a tag partner, I would try to help him. But you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
It's a tall ask for anybody. Like, hey, take this guy. He's enormous, and he's green, and make him a wrestler. It's like, okay, I'll try.
Yeah, really.
Ted,
headlock.
Honestly, a guy that size, it's like that's all you need. Put him in like a chokehold and get him in the corner and punch him. Like I feel like we can tell the story without you murdering somebody by accident out here. So look, the stuff about Zeus is that he was getting 5-star hotels. He was getting limousine treatment. He was getting $1,000 every time he walked through the curtain with the WWF. So it's like he's in a pretty enviable spot here, and it makes me wonder, Ted. Would you say that you resented Zeus for the spot that he had, the money he was making, or were you happy to be along for the ride for this kind of? It's a big angle.
Well, here's the deal. Back then, nobody knew what he was making. Because if everybody knew what he was making, they would all, you know, we would all be going, "What the are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
You know. And once again, you've done it, Marcus. I'm sitting here going, "You got to be shitting me." I didn't know they were paying him that much.
Yep. Those are facts and figures, actually, that Art Anderson put out on his podcast, where he said we knew, well, maybe some select folks knew what this guy was making, or Arn maybe found out later as an agent for WWE.
Yeah.
But yes, apparently $1,000 every time he came through the curtain, limousine service, all that kind of stuff, and he wasn't really responsible for anything. So, like, if he shows up to the building late, Who gets in trouble? Probably Randy Savage, who is supposed to smarten him up on it. You're supposed to get to the building at this time, and here's where you go, and you got to get dressed and look at the sheet when you get there, and all that kind of stuff. So man, it just I can see why a lot of guys hated his guts.
Yeah.
I mean, and
here's the thing, I get it when, okay, if you try to look at it from Vince's point of view, Vince sees this great big well-built guy who, and he's obviously going to put him with somebody who can take care of him, and he sees money.
Mm-hmm.
He sees money. Okay, I get that, but by the same token, what about all the other guys that are, that are carrying the load,
busting their butts day in, day out on the road?
Yeah.
Yep. Now it's interesting for you in this circumstance though too, because it's again pretty shitty that a guy like Zeus is in the position that he's in with the lack of experience that he has. However, he's there to promote No Holds Barred, so it's kind of like this really big event, and Vince is putting all of his energy and thought behind, I'm going to use this Zeus guy to promote the movie that we're making, and so it's a big angle, and now you're in the middle of it. So it's like a little column A, a little column B, kind of shitty that you've got to school this guy up, but at the same time, it's like, well, Ted DiBiase is also featured in the ring with these guys and all the hype that surrounds it. So it's like, I don't know, how did you feel about the whole thing?
Well, I was obviously fine with it because I was in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't, the curtain jerking match or second or third match, I'm up there at the top of the card.
So a pretty decent spot to be in. Certainly better than being another guy on the card who's just watching all this happen. So
Yeah.
At least you're involved in it.
Yeah.
Do you know if did you ever talk to Randy about his role as kind of a babysitter for Zeus, or not so much?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well,
I mean, Randy and I got along, but it wasn't like we were buddies. We saw each other in the dressing room and everything, and we had, again, WrestleMania 4 and all of that. So Randy and I, and again, we're two guys who grew up in the business. And I got along fine with Randy, but it wasn't like we were buddy. I didn't have a lot of, hey Randy, how was your day? Da 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 da, and that type of thing.
I imagine he
was kind of that way anyway. I mean, he had his, he had his wife there, and that was a unique thing too. So
I imagine Randy could be hard to get to know because he was so. I mean, the rumor around him is that he was incredibly paranoid.
Yeah, and he and Elizabeth they had their own dressing room, and I get that, but here you are, your wife is part of the show, and your wife's a good looking girl, it's kind of like the deal is, it's like, if you love her enough that you married her, that must mean you trust her.
Yep.
But everything else Randy did said otherwise. It's kind of like maybe he trusted her, but but obviously he wouldn't trust any of the wrestlers. You know what I'm saying? And I get that, but by the same token, if you know who your wife is, I mean, Melanie, she had wouldn't care about being like my valet or anything like that. Didn't want to be a part of the show. But if anything like that had ever been, I had full trust in her. I mean, it's like, if anybody smarted off to her or said something off key to her, she'd come right to me and say, "Hey, so and so is running his mouth,"
And just like from a logical standpoint, like how much of an idiot would you have to be to try and sleep with Randy Savage's wife?
Yeah.
He's one of the top stars in the company. Like, are you really going to take that risk with your career?
Yeah.
Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, and that's what, and all of us knew that Randy was that way. He was just paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so. Anyway.
Any chance you ever witnessed? Now this is a rumor, and some folks have confirmed the rumor. Let's see if you can. Any chance you ever witnessed Randy whenever he wouldn't have Liz come to the ring with him? Rumor has it he would lock her in a closet.
I never heard that.
Okay, so maybe it's not true. I don't know.
You know, and I would venture to say, I mean, I think that's a rib.
Somebody making it up.
It's kind of like, you know, like, yeah, it was just somebody saying, "Oh yeah, he, you know, they're married, but he locks her in a closet." You know,
I think you might be correct.
But I'll be honest with you, if he did, that would be this stupidity,
insanity, really.
Yeah.
And I get it. He was raised in the business, and the thing that I say this all the time on my podcast, the thing that was kind of drilled into wrestlers' heads back in the day was keep your wife out of the business. And I know that a lot of guys followed that rule really strongly. Don't let your wife know what you're doing. Don't let your wife know where you are on the road. Don't ever bring your wife around the boys. Like those are rules that like a lot of guys were told back in those days.
Yeah.
Did you have that mentality when it came to, like, you know, if Vince said to you, "Hey, I want to bring your wife in as your manager," would you have been game for it?
Nope.
And is that just to keep her away from?
I mean, just for general purposes, you know, it's kind of like, no, you know, it would be different if my wife had been, you know, some world-class athlete and what you know what I'm saying, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but no, it's like, no, my wife's not
a performer.
Just a performer. You know, she's going to be a stay home and raise the children wife.
That's really where the rubber meets the road. Is it?
Yeah.
If you've got children, boy, somebody's got to be there for the kids, right?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I would for sure. I mean, I don't even think Vince McMahon would balk the fact that, you know, you get married and your wife gets pregnant and you have children. Oh, well, no, you know, you're going to have to find a babysitter for your kids. No.
There's only two options. Either dad stays home or mom stays home. Doesn't really seem like it was an option for you.
No.
Now, you're facing Jake on the house show loop heading into Survivor Series, and so Jake, he's back from injury, which is great, but one thing sticks out really particularly for me when I was doing the research on this. Apparently, on November 3rd, 1989, you guys are in Denver in front of 5,000 people, and Jake is going to beat you in the match, but what's noted by somebody who was there live is that Jake repeatedly was pulling down your trunks throughout the course of the match as the match went on. So to me, this sounds like Jake ribbing you. Does this sound familiar to you at all?
That sounds like something Jake would do. You know, yeah, you know, and I would obviously find some way to repay him. Gotta find some way to do it, but just it struck me as really funny because now I'm in the ring and I wear wrestling trunks, so already you're kind of going out there and it's like, yeah, you kind of feel like you're in your underwear in front of a bunch of people. So I can't imagine my opponent actively trying to pull my trunks down while I'm out there as well. Boy, what a rip. Well, I don't know. It would be, you know, it wouldn't be like so obvious that, you know, because the last thing you're going to do is try to do something that, again, in a serious match, that's going to make people laugh. Unless it's, you know, obviously I'm the heel. So if you could do something like that, you know, okay. Yeah, but I don't think he would repeatedly. I don't know if I buy that. So I can't remember that.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it happened twice over the course of the match or something, and you know, because it's a fan report. A lot of the fans will go to these live shows and then report to Dave. Well, here's what was going on at this show. So maybe it happened a couple of times, and the fan was like, "Oh, it was over and over again," you know.
Yeah.
Funny rib though. I am wondering, Jake, he's coming back from this neck surgery, and obviously in a couple of years, you're going to know what that's like because you're going to suffer the exact same injury as Jake had. Would you say that it changed the way that you worked with Jake when he's coming back from a neck injury, or is it just full steam ahead?
Well, it's full steam ahead, but it's but given that, okay, he's back from an injury. And we talked, and I said, okay, let's just, and obviously I would be very careful not to, it's like, okay, you just had neck surgery. I'm going to give you a pile driver. You just stay away from that shit.
What's interesting, though, it's funny that you should say that, is that there's a photo of you and Jake out there from this rivalry. I hope I can find it so I can add it to this. But it's a photo of you giving Jake a pile driver. And so I asked Jake about it because we did an episode about Survivor Series. By the way, folks who are listening to this, go and check out that episode of the Snake Pit. It was like maybe 2 episodes ago or something, so you can really get the full story behind it. And I'm also, right after I finish with Ted, I'm going to be recording with Jim Duggan. And guess what? Jim and I are talking about this exact same subject. So you're really going to get the full story from Survivor Series 1989 from 3 guys who lived it. But on that episode with Jake, I mentioned that photo to him, and his response was, I wouldn't let anybody give me a pile driver except for DiBiase because I trusted him.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the whole thing. That's why we always gelled well. It was a trust thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's very hard to be in the ring with somebody that you don't trust or you don't think, And I can't recall having anybody that I worked with that I didn't trust. In terms of there might be somebody that, okay, you might do this to so and so, but you're not going to do it to me.
I think that you had everybody's respect. So I'm sure that you knew that at the time, like, okay, nobody's going to fuck with Ted because everybody respects Ted.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, let's get to Survivor Series. Meltzer's going to say that you were the only person who got in the way of the match being a complete nightmare. Meaning that your work was so good that you were able to carry some of the less able folks involved in the match. I don't know if that's fair when you've got a worker like Jake Roberts on the other side, but it does raise an interesting point. You're teamed with the Warlord, Barbarian, and Zeus for this. All lovely human beings, I'm sure. But none of them are close to being considered the kind of worker that you were at this time.
Yeah.
I think that most people would probably categorize Warlord and Zeus as extremely bad in-ring workers. And I don't mean any disrespect, but they just weren't adept as in-ring performers. So with all that being said, does this kind of pairing add a lot of pressure to you as the lone workforce heel in the match? Like, did you feel pressure going into a situation like this?
Well, I don't know that, I felt a lot of pressure. Marcus, we wrestled every night. It's like, this is just another show, and this is the way we're going to do it, and this is the way we'll get through it. Bottom line is, everybody did their part, but at the end of the day, it's, I guess you would say the 2 captains of the teams that are going to carry the load.
Yes.
So.
And that's certainly how it went here. A lot of fans can go back and watch the match, and for the most part, it's like you're the most active participant in the match, as it should be. Zeus is eliminated early, as he should be. He gets disqualified for like choking Hogan or something, and that's the end of him. So that works out okay. But yeah, it just makes sense to have you kind of carry the action. Let Zeus and Barb come in and do their thing, or Warlord and Barb come in and do their thing. But for the most part, it's going to be you kind of working with the baby faces.
Yeah.
Ted, if you can believe it, both Barb and Warlord are still active in the ring, and both have wrestled here this year in 2024. Pretty remarkable, huh?
That is pretty remarkable. But it's kind of like, it's also a little bit funny because, here's two great big brutes, right? Mm-hmm. And they're still 2 great big brutes, and it's kind of like, nothing against Nick. I personally like both of those guys, but those guys, they weren't the guys out there bumping around like Jake and I did. Putting our bodies out there, basically. It's kind of like, they could probably wrestle another, for the amount of work they did in the ring, they could wrestle another 10 years.
There's some irony there. It's like guys like you and Jake, these very like polished in-ring performers, and it's like your careers have been over. But these guys, you're right, they weren't taking a whole lot of bumps, and it shows. They're still out there able to work at their age.
Yeah, if you want to call it that.
they go to the ring. I don't know if they work.
Yeah, they go to the ring and do what? They kick somebody's butt. Right?
Right? That's probably about it. Get tagged in real quick, beat the guy up, tag back.
Yeah. Hey, but man, both those guys are great guys.
Yes, no disrespect whatsoever.
Not at all.
I do want to ask you about Barb a little bit. He's a name that we probably aren't going to discuss here a ton on the show, so it feels like now's our chance. Did you get to spend much time around Barbarian, and what do you think of him?
Yeah, Barb's okay. I mean, locker room, on the road, stuff like that. In the hotel, maybe. I can't remember whether I saw him, but he wasn't like he wasn't going to the bars every night or what. I don't know.
I know that you were buddies with Ming Haku, so that's why it made me wonder, because those two are close affiliates. And
again, now Haku, that's Tonga.
Yeah,
Tonga Fafita.
What a great
he is from the island of Tonga, and God bless him. He is such a nice guy, because you wouldn't want a guy that's as tough as him to be anything other than a nice guy. So, yeah. I mean, Tonga's one of those guys that, he can be in the room by himself whenever he wanted to be.
Man, it makes you wonder what a guy like that could have done if UFC had been a thing back in those days. Like if he had decided to become an Ultimate Fighter, it's like, who the hell's going to beat that guy?
Yeah.
Well, for the finish at Survivor Series, Virgil's going to come out and distract Jake, and then you'd nail Jake with the fist drop and put your feet on the ropes to pin him before you yourself would be defeated by Hogan, and the crowd gets to go home happy. So a nice way for the baby faces to get over, but then also your program with Jake is continuing. There is something I found a little bit odd about this, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to speak to it or not. I'm just curious about your opinion. This match was billed as the main event, but it goes on second to last. So Ted, if you had to guess, why do you think, it's Hogan and Zeus? The story for No Holds Barred is being built up. It's Ted DiBiase involved in this main event. And it doesn't close the show. Do you have, if you were to guess at it, why do you think that would be the case?
I don't know.
Weird, isn't it? I can think. Go ahead.
Okay, what was billed as the main event?
Well, the main event is the Ultimate Warriors, which is the team of the Ultimate Warrior, Jim Neidhart, Shawn Michaels, and Marty Jannetty against the Heenan family, which is Bobby Heenan, Andre the Giant, Haku, and Arn Anderson. So there's your main event. So I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that it's Warrior and Andre that Vince is like, let's put that on last.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, look, I am glad that we brought up the main event here, Ted, because there is an interesting note, and this is how we're going to close out the show tonight. So the main event is changed, and it's changed in pretty controversial fashion. I just laid out that it's Bobby Heenan and Haku and Arn Anderson and Andre, which might make you wonder, where was Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson's tag team partner? Well, on the way, Tully Blanchard is going to fail a drug test before this event. And he himself is going to go on to say that he failed it a week or two prior, but they wanted to beat him up on TV before letting him go. So Heenan is going to replace him in this match, and Tully's career on a large stage in wrestling as a result of this comes to an end. I had mentioned earlier in the podcast that Arn and Tully, they gave their notice to Vince, and they're going back to the NWA, and they got a package deal as a tag team. So once Jim Herd catches wind that Tully has failed a drug test, he pulls back on the contract. So Tully's contract is gone. And by the way, Arn, now you're not coming in with your tag team partner. So I'm going to pay you about half of what I originally offered. So Arn Anderson gets screwed on this deal. Tully Blanchard essentially never works on a big stage in wrestling again. He'll do some indie stuff. He'll show up once in WCW. I think he does ECW. And that's it for Tully Blanchard's career. So Ted, I say all that to say, boy, Vince is not shy about just kind of pushing a button and carpet bombing a guy's career, is he?
Well, no, I mean, it's kind of like, but again, you know, if you follow the rules, you know, it's not that hard to figure out.
You make a really good point. And something that I think goes under the radar a little bit is like, everybody's like, oh man, Vince, he's so vindictive. You know, he wanted to bury Tully because he gave him his notice and now he's leaving. And all of a sudden Vince decides to screw him on his way out the door. And it's like, well, he would not have been able to screw him if Tully hadn't done some cocaine.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you know.
Well, Tully is, I know that he was your quarterback at West Texas State. And again, this is kind of the end of his career. Would you say that you were buddies with him, or, you know, when you hear that his career's kind of come to a close?
You know, I have no issues with Tully today. Tully is actually, you talk about a guy who did a turnaround, you know, it goes all the way back to, you know, I came to West Texas State, you know, as a freshman, and I played football there for 3 years. And then the only reason, you know, it's the summer between my junior and senior year is that summer where everything in wrestling went so good that I didn't go back and finish. Mm-hmm. You know, and but again, and that's where I first met Tully, because Tully came in there my sophomore year, and he came in as the quarterback, right?
Yes.
But all my buddies are coming to me, and they're going, "What's up with this asshole?" You know, like who does he think he is? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, yeah, you know, he might have been the quarterback, but, you know, he was not well liked.
Tully, a changed man. I've had the pleasure of being around him a few times, and I like him. Seems like a really nice guy. However, would you say that during his time in the WWF, there was still some of that prick Tully Blanchard in him?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. You know, and, you know, like his dad was a promoter, Joe Blanchard. You know, ran shows in South Texas where Tully's from, and you know, and I can't remember where Tully went first, but he didn't make it there, so they sent him to West Texas State, and he was our quarterback, and you know, and he was just a little prick, you know, and I can't remember how long ago it happened, but you know, somewhere along the way, you know. Tully found the Lord, and now Tully Blanchard lives in San Antonio. His pastor is John Hagee, who I have a world of respect for, and Tully is in charge of the prison ministry for Pastor Hagee's church, and which is, I think it's called Cornerstone. And so that's what Tully's doing today. He's in charge of the prison ministry and just kicking butt and taking names, changing lives. And that's, you know, that's great. You know, only God, you know what? Only God can change a man.
And I'm a big fan of Tully Blanchard and his work. A big fan of him as a person nowadays, too. I think he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And I think that he himself said that this whole happening for him is what directly led to him developing a relationship with God. Is you know, kind of like the bottom fell out. You know, all of a sudden he's been on TV for years and years, and now it's like all he's able to get are indie bookings. And I think that it forced him to kind of have a hard look at himself.
Yeah.
So blessing in disguise, maybe.
Yeah. So I remember, you know, I hadn't seen, you know, and I didn't see a lot of Tully. And I went down. I did a Comic-Con in San Antonio, And I asked somebody, I said, Cornerstone Church here, John Hagee's church. I said, I just wanted to know if there was somebody that could take me to church Sunday morning, go to church, go to the service, and go back and then start at the Comic-Con, little did I know when I walked up to the front door, who's standing there greeting people? Tully.
How about that?
Unbelievable.
How about that?
That was so cool. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, proof positive that people can change, man.
Absolutely.
Well, Ted, this was a really fun episode. I love looking back to this era in your career. Again, I've said it a few times here on the show, and Meltzer always puts you over. This is maybe you at your peak as a professional wrestler. You were buzzing and clicking there in the ring. So it's really fun to look back at this. I mean, we watched that clip. You're in phenomenal physical condition. Like everything is going the $1 Million Man's way. So I'm excited to continue the story. We'll probably pick it up, in January 1990 with the Royal Rumble.
Sounds like a winner to me, Marcus.